Hey guys, just want to say thanks for tuning in to Wide Awake Horror today. Today we've got some true horror stories for you guys to hear. Now, if you enjoy these stories, as always, please smash that like button. And if you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join the family. Now, let's enjoy some new stories.
I'd been talking to her for weeks. I was used to online dating and the usual headaches that came with it. You know the drill: people ghosting, making excuses, or just not being who they say they are. But with her, everything felt different. Her name was Mia, and honestly, I couldn't believe someone like her was actually interested in me. It was like something out of a movie, too perfect to be true. But for once, I didn't care. I just wanted it. We started chatting on one of those apps that people don't really talk about out loud, but everyone uses. The conversations were easy, like we'd known each other for years. I'd wake up and check my phone to see a dozen texts from her, all thoughtful and funny. We talked about everything: the kind of music we liked, our childhood memories, our favorite books. At first, I was a little skeptical, but the more we talked, the more I was hooked. She was everything I wanted: genuine, down to earth, and just easy to talk to. After a few weeks of texting nonstop, we decided it was finally time to meet in person. I'll admit I was a little nervous. I mean, yeah, I knew what she looked like from her profile, but photos can only tell you so much, right? And like most people, I've had my fair share of bad dates. The ones where you show up and they look nothing like their pictures, or they have a completely different vibe in person. But with Mia, I had a good feeling. We agreed to meet at a cafe downtown, a place I'd been to 100 times before. It wasn't too fancy or anything, but it had good coffee and a cozy atmosphere, perfect for a first date. I walked in, scanning the room, and I saw her immediately. She was sitting at a table near the window, looking out at the street. Her long, dark hair fell just past her shoulders, and she was wearing this simple, soft sweater that made her seem approachable, comfortable, like she wasn't trying too hard. I took a deep breath and walked over. As I got closer, my heart started pounding. This was it. I was finally going to meet her in person. But just as I was about to sit down, she turned her head slowly, looked at me and her face. Well, that wasn't what I expected. She looked confused, like she was seeing a ghost. I stopped dead in my tracks. "You're not him," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I froze. My mind raced. Not him. What was she talking about? I looked around the cafe, half expecting some other guy to walk in and reveal himself as her actual date. But there was no one else. It was just me and her. I forced a nervous smile. "What do you mean?" "It's me, I'm—" But before I could finish, she interrupted, her eyes wide with something between confusion and fear. "I've been talking to your ghost," she said, almost in a daze. I stared at her, not sure if she was joking or if she was serious. My stomach dropped. Ghost. What was she talking about? I wanted to laugh it off, to brush it aside as some rude joke, but the look on her face stopped me. It wasn't a joke. There was real fear in her eyes. "Okay, Mia, I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it's me. It's really me." She shook her head slowly, her eyes never leaving mine. "No, I've been talking to him for weeks." "Not you. Him. Your ghost." I couldn't tell if she was losing it or if she knew something I didn't. Either way, I had no idea what was going on. This wasn't how I imagined meeting her. We both just stood there, staring at each other in awkward silence. I wanted to ask her more, but something told me to just sit down, so I did. She didn't look like she was going to run, but she also didn't seem like she was in a hurry to make this whole situation any less weird. I asked her if she was okay, and she nodded, but she didn't seem okay. She looked pale, like she hadn't slept in days. She just kept staring at me, like she was trying to figure out who I was. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to explain that I was the same person she'd been talking to for the past few weeks, that I was real. But the words stuck in my throat. "Who are you?" she asked, almost pleading. I don't know what made me say it, but I asked her, "Who's this ghost you're talking about? Was there someone else you were talking to?" At that, her eyes filled with something else, something that felt like recognition. But it wasn't a good feeling. It was like she saw something she wasn't supposed to. "He was here. When you were talking to me," she whispered. "He was in the room with us, and I could feel him. But he's not you. He's not real, but he was with me. And he said he'd never leave. Not until he had you." I couldn't understand what she was talking about. I felt a cold rush of fear suddenly sweep through me. Was she talking about some kind of ghost story? Had she read something creepy on the internet and gotten it stuck in her head? But I didn't know how to respond. I had no idea what was going on. All I knew was that I didn't want to be a part of whatever mess she'd gotten herself into. I don't know what you mean, I said, my voice trembling a little. But you're talking to me right now. I'm here. She closed her eyes as if trying to block me out. I didn't know what to do. I was starting to feel like I was in the middle of some weird dream that I couldn't wake out from. And then just like that, she opened her eyes again, and her expression shifted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something else. Something darker. It's him, she said. He's here. I turned to look behind me, but there was no one there. The cafe was still quiet, with just a few people sipping their coffee, going about their business. But when I looked back at Mia, I could tell that something was wrong. She was staring at me with wide, unblinking eyes, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of something in her gaze, something that wasn't human. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, but it made my skin crawl. I don't know what you're talking about, I said, trying to sound firm, but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice. Mia didn't answer me. She just sat there, her gaze fixed on the empty seat next to me. A silence stretched between us, thick and heavy. It felt like time had stopped. I don't know how long we sat there in that uncomfortable silence, but eventually I stood up, ready to leave. I'd had enough of whatever this was. Mia didn't even try to stop me. She just sat there, staring into space like she was waiting for something. I don't know what happened to Mia after that. I walked out of the cafe, my heart still pounding, my mind reeling. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Maya had known something about me that no one else could possibly know. It was like she'd been talking to someone else, someone who shouldn't have existed. A ghost. And what scared me the most was the thought that maybe I hadn't been talking to her at all. Maybe I'd been talking to the ghost she mentioned, and somehow it had been pretending to be me all along. I never went back to that cafe, and I never spoke to Maya again. But every now and then, I'll get a text from her, a random message, like it's from some other version of her. And I can't help but wonder if she's still talking to my ghost. It started out like any other dating app story. A quick swipe, a quick match, and there he was. Jason. He had this charm to him that I couldn't ignore. Handsome, easy to talk to, and just the right amount of mystery. I'm not usually into the whole online dating thing, but after a few bad dates and a bit of convincing from my friends, I decided to give it a shot. Jason was different. From the get-go, he seemed normal, maybe even a little too perfect. I wasn't complaining, though. Who was I to judge? We started chatting right away. At first, it was all the usual stuff. What do you do for work? Where do you live? What's your favorite food? But after a couple of days, it felt like we really clicked. The conversations felt easy, like we were already comfortable with each other. He was funny, a little sarcastic, and definitely charming. By the end of the week, we were making plans to meet in person. I'll admit I was a little nervous. Meeting someone from an app can always be a gamble, but Jason's vibe felt genuine, so I pushed my doubts aside. He suggested that we meet up at his place after dinner. He'd cook something special, he said. A little intimate dinner just for us. I wasn't expecting a fancy restaurant, but I liked the idea of it being just the two of us in a relaxed setting. It seemed like a good way to get to know him better. So after meeting up at a small cafe nearby, we went to his apartment. It was in one of those upscale buildings downtown, the kind with the shiny glass doors and the polished marble floors. Honestly, I wasn't surprised. Jason seemed like the type who would have a nice place, and it wasn't hard to tell he had his life together. His apartment was even better than I imagined. It was spacious and modern, the kind of place you'd expect to see in a magazine. Everything was neat, well organized. He showed me around, gave me a drink, and we sat down at the small dining table in the corner, talking more about our lives and what we enjoyed doing. The conversation was easy, and I was starting to relax. That was until I noticed the locked door. It was in a hallway, just past the kitchen. I hadn't seen it at first, but once I did, it stuck out like a sore thumb. It was a dark wooden door, old-fashioned compared to the sleek, modern feel of the rest of the apartment. It was locked, but what caught my attention wasn't the lock itself. It was the way the door seemed out of place. I didn't know what it was, but something about it felt off. I tried not to stare, but it was hard not to. Jason noticed me glancing at it and smiled. Curious? He asked, as if reading my mind. I looked back at him, unsure how to respond. Was it really okay to ask? But I've been to enough people's homes to know that everyone has a few oddities. Maybe it was just a storage room or something. So, what's behind that door? I finally asked, trying to sound casual. Jason's smile faltered for a second, but he recovered quickly, leaning back in his chair. Oh, that's just the room where my ex lives, he said, almost casually, like it was no big deal. She's not happy about the breakup. I froze. The words didn't register at first. I couldn't have heard him right. My mind raced, trying to process what he just said. His ex. What did he mean by that? And why was the door locked? I tried to laugh it off, but I could feel my stomach turn. Jason, noticing the hesitation on my face, leaned forward a bit. Don't worry. She's harmless. Just a bit of a lingering problem, you know. I haven't had the chance to get her stuff out yet. She's not exactly thrilled with the breakup. I didn't know what to say. A lingering problem? Was he being serious? The more I thought about it, the more it didn't sit right with me. Who keeps their ex locked up in a room in their apartment? It wasn't just the fact that the door was locked. It was the casualness with which he mentioned it. Like this was normal, like this wasn't something that should raise any red flags. But it did. Every fiber of my being screamed that I should leave, that something wasn't right, but I didn't want to be rude. After all, it was just an ex, right? Some unresolved feelings, maybe. But as I sat there trying to push the unease down, I couldn't shake the thought of what could really be behind that door. Was his ex still living in there, or was it just a metaphor for something else? The whole thing felt like a bad joke, but I wasn't sure if I was the punchline. I tried to change the subject, but Jason didn't seem to want to let it go. He kept bringing it up, casually, like he didn't realize how uncomfortable I was with it. As he went on, talking about how his ex was just a bit difficult, I found myself getting distracted by the door. Every time he turned his back, I found myself glancing at it. I couldn't help it. Something about that room just didn't sit right with me. And the more I looked at it, the more it felt like it was calling to me. Eventually, Jason stood up to get us more drinks. As he walked to the kitchen, I found myself standing up without thinking. I didn't even know what I was doing, though my feet moved on their own. I walked slowly toward the door, drawn to it like a magnet. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I couldn't tell if it was fear or something else entirely. I stood in front of the door for what felt like an eternity, my hand hovering over the doorknob. I could hear Jason moving around in the kitchen, but I couldn't bring myself to turn back. What was behind the door? Was his ex really locked inside, or was it something worse? Before I could decide, I heard footsteps approaching. I quickly stepped away from the door, my heart racing even faster. Jason appeared, a smile on his face, oblivious to what I had just done. Sorry about that, I said, trying to act normal, but my voice sounded shaky, just a little curious. He didn't seem to notice anything was off. No problem. I can understand that. The door is just, I haven't had a chance to deal with it. But you're safe here. Don't worry about her. The rest of the evening passed by in a blur. We talked, I laughed, and we drank. But I couldn't shake the image of that door in my mind. It haunted me. I kept wondering what Jason hadn't told me, what he was hiding. Eventually, I told him I needed to go. I was exhausted, and honestly, I felt like I'd had enough for one night. As I left his apartment, I glanced back at the door one last time. My stomach churned. Something was wrong. Jason was charming, no doubt about it. But there was something else lurking beneath the surface, something dark I hadn't seen yet. I don't know what I was expecting when I left that night, but it wasn't the feeling that something was following me, watching me. And as I got into my car and drove away, I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't been alone in that apartment. That maybe, just maybe, his ex wasn't the only thing he was hiding behind that door. I met her on the app, and at first I thought she was just like any other girl I'd matched with. A little cute, a little quirky, maybe a little too good to be true, but we all have our types, right? Her name was Emma, and after a few dates, I figured she was as normal as they come, funny, smart, easy to talk to, and everything seemed to fall into place effortlessly. You know the drill. Casual texts, maybe some late-night phone calls, and before I knew it, we'd already gone through a few dates, and things were moving at a pretty good pace. One weekend, she told me she was planning a family getaway, and she invited me to come along. I was a little hesitant at first. I mean, who invites someone they've just been dating for a couple of weeks to meet their family for a weekend retreat? It seemed a little rushed, but then again, Emma seemed so down to earth, and her family had a reputation for being super welcoming, so I figured why not. She promised it would be fun. A weekend in the woods, her family's big house. Nothing too fancy, just some good food and relaxation. I wasn't sure what I was expecting, but when she mentioned how much her family loved getting to know her new boyfriends, I thought, okay, this could be fun. I didn't want to seem like the guy who chickened out, especially after all the good times we'd had. So I packed my stuff, got in my car, and drove out to the house. I was a little nervous, but that's normal, right? Meeting someone's family for the first time, especially when it's someone you just started dating, is always a bit weird. But the moment I pulled up to the house, I knew I was in for something different. That house was huge, like huge. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Tall, dark, and set far back from the road, almost like it was hiding. It was old, the kind of place that had been around for centuries, with that dark, looming presence about it that made you wonder what kind of stories it held inside. The whole place felt like it was trapped in time. But Emma seemed so comfortable there, and when she ran out to greet me with a huge smile, I figured I was just overthinking things. She led me inside, and that's when the oddities started. Her family was all gathered in the living room, and there was something unsettling about the whole vibe. They were all seated together, almost like they had been waiting for me. The whole scene had this eerie stillness to it, like no one was saying much, but there was an unspoken tension in the air. It wasn't like a regular family reunion or get-together, where everyone's talking and laughing. This was different. The silence was thick, like they were all carefully observing me. They all just stared at me as I entered, and for a second, it felt like I was being judged, like they were all sizing me up, figuring out whether I was good enough for Emma. But that didn't feel quite right either. There was something about the way they were all so perfectly still, so unnervingly quiet, that had me on edge. I tried to brush it off. I told myself it was just nerves, or maybe they were all just a little shy. But the longer I stayed, the more uncomfortable I became. It wasn't just the silence. It was the way their eyes followed me wherever I went. They weren't saying anything, just staring. Not like normal stares, no, these were deliberate, almost predatory. Like they were all in on some secret that I didn't know about. Emma's mom, a tall, thin woman with long, dark hair, was the only one who spoke to me directly. But even then, it was like her words didn't quite reach me. She didn't smile when she spoke, and her voice was flat, like she was reading from a script. Her dad, he was an older man, stoic, and just as silent as the rest of them, nodded once, but didn't say anything. Her siblings were just as quiet, all staring at me with the same intensity. I could feel my skin crawling. I told Emma I needed to step outside for a minute to get some air, and she just smiled and nodded as if she expected it. The whole place felt like a bad dream, like something was about to happen, but I didn't know what. I needed to clear my head, so I stepped outside and tried to shake the weird feeling off. The air was cold, biting at my skin, and the wind howled through the trees. The whole house loomed behind me, dark and silent. I walked around the property, trying to distract myself from whatever was going on inside, but it didn't help. Eventually, I went back inside, but as soon as I walked through the door, everything seemed to get even worse. The family was still in the same positions, still staring at me. No one moved. No one spoke. The air was thick with unspoken words. I looked at Emma, hoping for a sign that everything was okay, but she was just smiling at me, her eyes a little too wide. She was standing by the door to the kitchen, her hands clasped in front of her, as if she was waiting for something. That's when I heard it. All at once, as if rehearsed, her family spoke in unison. They didn't raise their voices, but their words were clear, cold, and chilling. "We've been waiting for you," they said. My stomach dropped. I didn't know what to say. For a moment, everything around me seemed to go silent, like the world had just paused. I looked at Emma, confused, scared, and unable to make sense of it. Her smile was different now, wide, unsettling, almost as if she were enjoying this. I didn't know what to do or say. Was this some weird family tradition? A joke? But then Emma stepped forward, her smile widening, and she did something that made my heart stop. She pulled her hair back from her neck, revealing a dark, sinister mark on the side of her throat. It was an odd, almost unnatural shape, like something had been carved into her skin. It looked wrong, and for the first time I saw her eyes, really saw them. They weren't the warm, brown eyes I had fallen for. They were something darker, cold, calculating. The family didn't move, didn't say anything else. They just kept staring at me, waiting for me to react, waiting for me to understand. Emma's smile never faltered. That's when I knew. This wasn't a normal family, and I wasn't invited here for a relaxing weekend getaway. I needed to leave, but as I turned to the door, it hit me. The door was locked. No one had told me that. I tried the knob, but it wouldn't budge. My heart raced. I turned around, but they were all still watching me, their eyes cold, calculating, like they knew what I was about to do. I took a step back, panic rising in my chest. I didn't know what kind of game they were playing, but I knew I wasn't going to be a part of it. Emma's voice was low and she spoke again, her smile still wide. You can't leave. You're part of the family now. You're here to stay. I don't know how, but I managed to break free, scrambling for the window. I don't even remember how I got out of there, but I ran. I didn't look back. I've never contacted Emma again. I don't even know if she's real anymore. All I know is that the moment I stepped into that house, I walked into something I'll never be able to explain. I had been talking to Ryan for a couple of weeks before we decided to meet. He was charming, funny, and a bit mysterious. He had that whole I've seen the world vibe, and we clicked instantly. One night, after a few great conversations over text, he invited me to dinner. He told me he knew this place, a hidden gem, one of those little spots that only locals know about. I liked the idea. It seemed intimate, personal, like he was showing me something special. I'm not into the typical chain restaurants, so when he said this place was off the beaten path, I was all in. He didn't tell me the name of the restaurant at first, just said it was perfect for a date. I didn't think much of it. I figured he wanted to surprise me with something unique. And hey, I was up for an adventure. So I get dressed, looking nice but not over the top, and meet him outside my apartment. He looked great too, wearing a crisp jacket and a smile that said he was happy to be with me. He led me to his car, and we drove off into the city. The street started to look less familiar the further we went, but I didn't think too much about it. He had this calm confidence, like he knew exactly where he was going. I didn't want to be that person who asks a million questions, so I just went along with it. We ended up in this quiet part of the city, a neighborhood I'd never seen before. It was dark, with narrow streets lined by old buildings and a few scattered shops that looked like they hadn't been touched in decades. The kind of place that felt like it belonged in a movie, quaint, but eerie in its stillness. Ryan parked the car and led me down a side street to a small, dimly lit restaurant. The sign outside was simple, just a faded, almost unreadable font with no name. It wasn't even clear if it was a restaurant or just some old place trying to pretend it was. But Ryan seemed excited, and when he held the door open for me, I figured, why not? The moment I stepped inside, I got this weird vibe. The ambience was off. It was cozy in a way, but it felt too quiet, too perfect. Everything was immaculate, almost like it hadn't been touched for years. The air smelled strange, rich, but not in a pleasant way. It was like the scent of something old mixed with an undercurrent of something I couldn't quite place. The inside was small, with only a few tables scattered around. The walls were covered in dark wood, and there was barely any light, just a few candles flickering on each table. It felt like we were in a secret, forgotten place. I had to admit the whole thing was a little unsettling, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was just the atmosphere of the place. After all, Ryan had picked it, so it must have been good right. We were seated at a table in the far corner. The waitress, an older woman with sharp eyes and a stiff smile, didn't seem to have much to say. She handed us menus that were just a little too clean, the edges too perfect, almost as if they'd never been opened before. I glanced at it, half expecting to see some hipster list of food I couldn't pronounce, but what I saw instead stopped me cold. The menu wasn't a list of dishes, it was a list of names. My name was on the list. I stared at the menu for a second too long. My name, right there, printed in the same neat font as everyone else's. I didn't know how to react. Maybe it was just some weird gimmick. But no, that couldn't be it. This wasn't some restaurant that specialized in quirky menus. This was something else. Ryan didn't seem to notice my shock. He was smiling, talking about how great the place was, how it was known for its specialty dishes. I couldn't even focus on what he was saying. My heart was racing as I skimmed through the rest of the menu. It was full of names, some familiar, some not. But there was something disturbing about it. Each name had a small number beside it, and I could feel the blood draining from my face as I realized the numbers corresponded to some kind of order. Order 57. That was me. But there were others too. Others who were still on the list. Before I could process this, I heard it loud and clear from the kitchen. Order 57. No more. It was a voice, deep, booming, and oddly calm. But there was something wrong with it. Like it wasn't coming from a person at all. I glanced at Ryan, but he didn't seem fazed by it. He didn't even seem to notice. It was like he expected it. I didn't know if I was hearing things or if something was seriously wrong. I looked around. The waitress was standing by the kitchen door, her face completely neutral. I wanted to ask her what was going on, but the words stuck in my throat. Ryan picked up his menu and flipped through it like nothing had happened. I sat frozen, staring at my name, trying to make sense of it. "Are you okay?" Ryan asked, finally noticing the look on my face. I didn't know what to say. What was there to say? How could I explain what I was feeling? I tried to brush it off, pretending like everything was normal. Yeah, just a bit tired, I guess. Ryan smiled and nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. He seemed so at ease, so completely comfortable, like this place, and everything about it was part of some strange, twisted normal. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality, and I didn't know how to get it back. The meal came. The dishes were strange, unlike anything I'd ever seen before, but I was too distracted to care about the food. My mind was racing with questions I couldn't answer. Why was my name on the menu? What was the significance of the number 57? Why did Ryan look like he knew exactly what was happening? And then there was that voice, the one that had yelled from the kitchen. It felt like it was echoing in my mind, bouncing off the walls of the restaurant, but no one else seemed to notice. I glanced around. The restaurant was full now, though I hadn't seen anyone come in. Everyone else at the tables looked strange. Their faces were too calm, too blank, like they were all in on some dark secret. I wanted to run, but I didn't know where to go. The place felt like a trap, and the longer I stayed, the more trapped I felt. I looked at Ryan, hoping for some kind of explanation, but he was smiling at me again, his eyes sparkling like he had all the answers I needed. And in that moment, I realized something. I wasn't supposed to be here. I didn't know how, but I knew it. I had walked into something I didn't understand, and now it was too late to leave. I had to get out, but as I stood up, the door slammed shut with a loud bang. The lights flickered, and for a split second, everything went dark. When the lights came back on, I was back at the table, seated as if nothing had happened. Ryan looked at me, still smiling, still calm. "You're part of the meal now," he said softly. I don't remember what happened after that. My mind went blank, and I felt myself falling into the kind of sleep you can't wake up from. When I finally came to, the restaurant was empty, the menu gone, and the staff all gone. I've never seen Ryan again, and I never want to. I had been using dating apps for a while, just like most people these days. Swiping left and right, hoping to find someone who wasn't completely insane, someone I could have a real conversation with. I had my fair share of weird encounters, people with strange habits or weird stories that made me think, okay, this is enough for today. But then I came across her profile. Her name was Lily, and she was exactly what I was looking for. Stunning, confident, and just different enough to keep things interesting. Her pictures looked like something out of a magazine, natural, yet effortlessly beautiful. She had kind of quiet, graceful elegance about her. I swiped right without thinking twice. We hit it off immediately. We talked for hours about everything, our favorite movies, the places we wanted to travel to, our childhoods. The conversation flowed so easily, it felt like we had known each other for years. It wasn't just the usual small talk. It felt real, and that's something I hadn't found in a long time. So when she suggested we meet up, I was beyond excited. It had been a while since I'd been genuinely interested in someone. We decided to meet at a small cafe in the city, the kind of place that has great coffee and an artsy vibe to it. It was perfect. I showed up early, my heart pounding a little faster than usual, not because I was nervous, but because I was excited to meet her. I imagined what she would look like in person. Would she be as beautiful as in her pictures? Would she feel as natural in person as she did over text? When she walked in, my breath caught in my throat. She was even more stunning in person. Her long brown hair, the way her eyes sparkled in the light, and that smile like she could light up the whole room with it. She was everything I'd hoped for and more. I was already smiling before she even saw me. She spotted me right away, her face lighting up when she did. We exchanged a quick hug, and I could feel the warmth of her body, the way she smelled faintly of lavender. It was like I had just walked into a dream. But then something strange happened. As we sat down at our table, she looked at me a little too intensely, like she was studying my face. I didn't think much of it at first. She was probably just trying to figure out if I looked like my photos right. I smiled at her, hoping she wasn't seeing anything weird, but then her expression seemed to shift slightly. It was subtle at first, like she was tilting her head just a little too much. But when I looked back at her, something about her face seemed off. I didn't know what it was, but the way her features seemed to smooth out, then slightly change, sent a wave of discomfort through me. It was like her face was shifting, almost imperceptibly, from one image to another, from the pictures in her profile. One moment, she looked like the woman in her first photo, bright eyes, soft features. The next, she looked more like the woman in the second picture, smiling, more confident, but the change was so quick, I wondered if I was just imagining it. I laughed nervously, thinking maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. I looked away for a moment, then back at her. But it was worse now. Her face was flickering, changing between the different women in her photos. I blinked, but no matter how many times I looked away, when I looked back, her face was different again. I couldn't breathe. I tried to focus on something else, anything else, but I found myself frozen, staring at her face as it morphed before my eyes. It was subtle. One moment, her eyes were smaller, and the next, they were wider. Her lips thinned, then became fuller. Her hair, once dark brown, turned into a lighter shade, like the lighting was making her look different every time I blinked. It wasn't like she was changing in front of me. It was like she was becoming the women in her photos, like they were all her, and none of them were her at the same time. I tried to clear my throat, hoping it would break the tension, but my voice cracked. She didn't seem to notice. She was still looking at me, but now I could feel something off about the way she was smiling. It wasn't a warm smile anymore. It felt almost predatory, like she knew something I didn't. The waitress came by to take our order, and I used the moment as an excuse to look away from her. But when I looked back, I couldn't even recognize her anymore. Her face was a complete jumble of features, different eyes, lips, and a nose that seemed to shift every second. I could hardly keep my gaze locked on her. This wasn't right. This wasn't normal. I stood up quickly, the chair scraping loudly against the floor. My heart was pounding, and I could feel sweat starting to form on my palms. I needed to get out of there, but my legs felt like they were made of jelly. I turned toward the door, hoping to make a quick escape, but as I reached for the handle, it wouldn't budge. I twisted it again, harder this time, but the door was locked. Panic started to set in. I pulled harder, my hands shaking. I had to leave, but the door wasn't opening. I looked over my shoulder, expecting to see Lily standing there, maybe laughing at me for being weird, but she wasn't. She was staring at me, her face shifting again, only this time it was worse. Her eyes were wide, too wide, and her mouth curled into a grin that wasn't hers. My breath caught in my throat as she stood up and slowly walked toward me. The way her steps were slow and deliberate sent a chill down my spine. I backed away from the door, now frantically looking around for another exit. There had to be another way out. But as I turned, I saw that the entire cafe seemed to stretch into darkness. The lights were dimming, and I could hear the soft sound of something scraping against the floor, like the chairs were moving on their own. The air felt heavier, as if it was closing in around me. Lily was standing in front of me now, too close. Her face had stopped shifting. Now it was blank, hollow almost, like the shell of a person. My heart was racing, and all I could think was, get out now. But my body wouldn't move. I was frozen, paralyzed by fear. I looked at her face one last time, and I realized then what was happening. She wasn't just changing into the women in her photos. She was becoming them, every single one of them. But they weren't just her. They were someone else, someone I didn't know, someone I wasn't supposed to know. The door finally creaked open behind me, but it wasn't the way I'd expected it. It wasn't freedom. It was the way into another place, another world, maybe. I turned to run, but Lily stepped in front of me. Her smile was wide now, her eyes gleaming with something dark, something I couldn't understand. I never saw Lily again after that night. I don't know what happened to her or what I really saw in that cafe. All I know is that the next day I checked my phone and her profile was gone. Just like that. Erased. I'd never swiped right on anyone again. I had been using dating apps for a while, and I thought I'd gotten pretty good at spotting the weird ones. The ones who message you with generic lines or ask for things that make you feel uncomfortable. But when I matched with him, Adam, everything felt different. He seemed genuine, like someone who actually cared to get to know me. His messages weren't just small talk. He'd ask about my day, listen to my responses, and we even have long conversations about random things, like our favorite books or childhood memories. He didn't seem to be rushing things, and he wasn't too forward, which made me feel comfortable. So after a couple of weeks of texting, we finally agreed to meet up. We decided on a local park, nothing too fancy, just a casual walk. I'm not the type to go all out on first dates, and from the way we'd been chatting, I figured this would be perfect. I like the idea of getting to know someone while walking around, taking in the fresh air. When we met, he was exactly how I had imagined him. Adam had this warm smile, soft brown eyes, and a relaxed way about him that put me at ease. We started walking through the park, talking like we had known each other for years. Everything was going great. We found a bench by a small lake, sat down, and continued chatting. It felt like a normal, pleasant date, nothing extraordinary, but in the best way possible. I felt comfortable, happy even. But after a couple of hours, something started to shift. It was subtle at first, like a slight change in his demeanor that I couldn't quite place. I noticed that Adam was looking around a lot, scanning the park, and his words began to slow down. It wasn't anything alarming, but it made me uneasy. He'd occasionally pause mid-sentence, then continue as if nothing was wrong. His eyes kept darting toward the trees, and I could tell his attention wasn't fully on me anymore. I figured he was just tired, maybe anxious about something. But then I started to notice something that made me stop in my tracks. He began repeating certain phrases, almost like he was talking to himself. At first, it was just a few words here and there, but it quickly became more obvious. This is where it happened. He muttered under his breath, his eyes locked on the lake. I didn't know what he meant by it, but it was like he had just spaced out completely. His expression was distant, like he was somewhere else in his mind. I wanted to ask him if he was okay, but something told me to hold off. Maybe he just had a bad day or was thinking about something that happened to him in the past. I tried to ignore it, but then he said it again, louder this time, as if the words weren't his own. "I can't let her go," he whispered, his voice trembling a little. I looked at him confused. What was he talking about? I glanced around, but there was no one else near us. The park was pretty quiet, just a few people walking their dogs or sitting on the grass. There was no reason for him to be acting this way, especially in the middle of a conversation about something completely different. I tried to laugh it off, thinking maybe he was making a joke. "Who's her?" I asked, unsure if I wanted to hear the answer, but his response didn't feel like a joke at all. "It's her, the one I lost." He said it with such sadness, his voice hollow. I felt a chill run down my spine. This wasn't some casual conversation anymore. It felt real and it felt heavy. I didn't know how to respond. Should I ask him about it, or would that make it worse? But I couldn't just sit there and pretend I didn't hear him. "Who did you lose?" I asked, my voice quieter now, hoping to ease into a serious conversation. He seemed to snap out of it for a moment, blinking rapidly like he was trying to wake up. Then he looked at me, his eyes wide and searching, like he hadn't even seen me sitting there next to him. For a moment, I thought maybe he had some kind of mental breakdown, but his next words made the situation feel even stranger. "Her name was Emily. She was everything. But I couldn't save her." His eyes started tearing up, but he wet them quickly, trying to stay composed. I sat there, unsure what to do. I was starting to get a little freaked out. This wasn't just a regular conversation anymore. I tried to think of something comforting to say, but nothing came to mind. How could I make this better? What can I say to someone who was so obviously in pain? As I opened my mouth to say something, he continued, "I'm sorry, I don't usually talk about her, not like this. But I can't let her go. She's always watching me. She won't leave." I didn't know how to process what he was saying. I wanted to believe it was just some kind of mental breakdown, but there was something in his tone, something in the way he spoke about Emily that made me feel like he wasn't talking about a person anymore. It felt like he was talking about a presence, something intangible, something that was still with him. I asked him again, a little more urgently. What do you mean she's still watching you? His gaze shifted toward the trees again. He didn't look at me this time, and his eyes focused on something far beyond the park, something that wasn't there. She never left, he muttered. I thought if I moved here, it would help, but she found me. She always does. I was starting to feel like I was in over my head. What kind of person says these things, especially on a first date? I felt bad for him, but at the same time, I was getting scared. Something about this situation felt wrong. I had to leave. I couldn't be there anymore. I tried to stand out, to make an excuse about needing to go, but before I could, Adam suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm. His grip was tight, and I could feel the panic rising in my chest. Don't go, he said, his voice almost pleading. You don't understand. She's watching us right now, right here, right now. I froze. My heart started racing, and my mind was in overdrive. What was he talking about? Was this some kind of elaborate prank? But looking at his face, I could see that he wasn't joking. He wasn't playing around. Please, he whispered, his voice breaking. You don't know what it's like. She won't let me go. I stood there still, not knowing what to do. The weight of his words was suffocating. I felt like I was stuck in some twisted nightmare, and I couldn't find my way out. I finally managed to pull my arm away, my body acting on instinct. Without saying another word, I backed away slowly, trying to keep my cool as I turned and ran. I didn't know if he was still behind me or if he was still saying those strange, disturbing things. But I didn't want to find out. I just needed to get away. I didn't look back as I walked to my car. I didn't even check if he was following me. All I could think about was getting out of there, away from whatever was going on in his head. That night, I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, those words echoing in my mind. She's watching us. I couldn't shake it. The feeling that something wasn't right, that something wasn't finished. I haven't heard from Adam since that day. His profile is gone, and I haven't seen him around. But I still wonder if he's okay, and I wonder if she's still watching. I matched with a girl named Claire on one of the dating apps. At first, I wasn't sure what to expect. Sometimes these things can be a hit or miss, and honestly, I wasn't sure if I was ready to get into anything serious. But then she started messaging me, and everything felt different. She had this calm, easygoing vibe that made it feel natural to talk to her. Her profile had a few pictures. She was beautiful, no doubt, but not in the overdone, stage way you see on some apps. She had a quiet kind of beauty that seemed real. We talked for a few days, and our conversations flowed effortlessly. We had a lot in common. I wasn't used to this kind of connection on a dating app. Most of the time, it's a few, hey, what's up? Messages and a bunch of ghosting after a couple of days. But Claire was different. She actually listened, and she made me feel like I was talking to someone I could really get to know. Eventually, we decided to meet up. We agreed on a quiet bar in the city, the kind of place that wasn't too packed, where you could actually hear each other talk. I was excited to meet her in person, but I'll admit I was a little nervous too. What if she wasn't the same as the girl I had been talking to online? What if there was some weird disconnect? But when I saw her walk in, I immediately felt at ease. She was even more beautiful than her photos, if that was even possible. She had this smile that lit up the room in her eyes. Those eyes were like they could see straight through me. We sat down and started talking right away. Everything was going smoothly. The conversation flowed just like it did online. She was kind, funny, and I felt like we were both genuinely interested in getting to know each other. After a while, we moved to a quieter corner of the bar, and that's when things started to feel off. It was subtle at first. She kept her distance, sitting just a little bit further away than I expected. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe she was just shy, or maybe I was being too forward in how close I was sitting. But then she said something that caught me off guard. She told me she had a deep fear of being touched. At first, I thought she was joking. Maybe she was just trying to be cute or quirky, but her face didn't change. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her expression was serious, almost a little distant, like she was wrestling with something inside her. I nodded, trying to be understanding. A lot of people have things they're dealing with, right? Maybe it was some trauma from her past. Who was I to judge? But as the night went on, it started to get worse. Every time I moved a little closer, she pulled back. It wasn't anything dramatic, but I could feel the tension building in the air between us. I could see her becoming more and more uncomfortable, like there was something she wasn't telling me. Eventually, I stopped moving closer. I didn't want to push her boundaries. But the more we talked, the more I started noticing things I hadn't before. Every time I made a joke or touched her arm lightly in a friendly way, she'd flinch, like she didn't want to be near me at all. It was subtle, but it was there, and it made my stomach twist in confusion. Why was she acting like this? We had been talking for days, and up until now, everything had seemed fine. Why was she so tense? I finally asked her if everything was okay, if she was feeling all right. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she just stared at the table, her hands gripping the edge of her glass tightly, her knuckles turning white. I could see her breathing getting a little heavier. It felt like there was some kind of weight she was carrying that she didn't want to share. Then she looked up at me, her face pale, her eyes wide with something that looked like fear or maybe desperation. I wasn't sure, but it hit me hard. "I've been trying to escape him," she said, her voice shaking. "For years. Every time someone touches me, I feel it again. I feel him. I can't escape it." I had no idea what she was talking about, but something in her eyes made me realize she wasn't kidding. She wasn't making this up. There was something real behind her words, something dark. It was like she was trapped in a memory, something that kept coming back to her every time she let someone close. I reached for her hand, instinctively wanting to comfort her, but the second I touched her skin, she flinched violently, pulling her hand away from mine so quickly it almost knocked her drink over. I didn't know what to do. I had no idea what she was going through, and I didn't know how to help her. She looked so terrified, like she was reliving something horrible. She took a deep breath and wiped her eyes, then told me the rest of the story. As she spoke, it felt like the air around us grew colder. Her voice was low, barely audible, but I could hear every word. Her last boyfriend, she told me, wasn't like other people. They had been together for a few months, and at first, everything seemed perfect. But then, one night, he started to get weird. She said he would touch her, but not in a way that was just physical. It wasn't like he was holding her hand or hugging her. It was different. He would touch her soul, literally, and it felt like she was being pulled out of her own body. She described it like he was taking something from her every time he touched her. Every time his hands connected with her skin, it felt like he was reaching into her, pulling her essence out. She couldn't explain it, but she said she could feel him in her, even after he was gone. His presence lingered in her like a stain that wouldn't wash away. And now, every time someone touched her, every time someone tried to get close, she could feel him again, like he was still attached to her, still trying to pull her away. The fear in her voice was enough to make my heart race. I didn't know if I believed her, but I could see the terror in her eyes. It was real for her, no matter what. She wasn't crazy, and I knew I couldn't just walk away from this. I didn't know what to say, so I just sat there, trying to process what she was telling me. I wanted to reach out to her again, to comfort her, but I was scared. I didn't want to be the one to make it worse. I wasn't sure if touching her would send her into some kind of breakdown, or if it would be the thing that pushed her over the edge, pulling her back to him, wherever he was. She got up suddenly, her face a mix of anger and fear. "I can't be touched," she whispered. "Not by anyone. Not again." And just like that, she left. Without another word, she walked out of the bar, leaving me sitting there, completely stunned. I never heard from her again. Her profile disappeared, and I couldn't find her anywhere. I don't know if she was telling the truth about what happened to her, but the way she looked at me, the way she reacted to me just trying to hold her hand, it all felt too real. I'm not sure what I believe anymore, but sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still hear her voice, that quiet, trembling whisper, telling me that she's trying to escape him. It all started out like any other dating app match. We connected, exchanged a few witty messages, and after a couple of days, we decided to meet up. His name was Jake, and from the very beginning, he seemed like the kind of guy who had everything together. He was funny, charming, and had this easygoing vibe that made talking to him feel like chatting with an old friend. His profile was full of candid shots from hiking trips, beach days, and visits to art galleries. Nothing weird. Just the kind of guy you could imagine having a normal first date with. Jake suggested a movie night at his place. He told me he had a bunch of movies queued up, and it would be low-key, no pressure. To be honest, that's exactly what I was looking for. I had just come off a string of bad dates, and the thought of just chilling and watching movies sounded perfect. No loud bars, no awkward small talk, just some snacks and a few good films. It was simple. I showed up at his apartment, and it was nice. Modern, clean, with just the right amount of cozy. He greeted me with a smile, and we sat down on the couch, settling in with popcorn and a couple of drinks. The movie started, and we fell into an easy rhythm, talking here and there, but mostly watching. I felt comfortable, happy even. Everything was going great, at first. It was when the movie was about halfway through that things started to shift. I didn't know what it was at first, but there was this subtle change in his behavior. It wasn't anything dramatic, nothing that would make you immediately think something was wrong, but there was a slight shift in his energy. He glanced at me a little too often, and his smile seemed forced, like it was painted on. But I shrugged it off. Maybe he was nervous, or maybe I was overthinking it. I wasn't going to make a big deal out of something small. But then it happened. He said something, almost under his breath, and I thought I misheard him at first. This is where it happened. I looked at him unsure if he was talking to me or to himself. He didn't seem to notice my confusion, and the movie continued without a hitch. But something about that line stuck with me. It didn't make sense. What happened? Had I missed something in the conversation? Had he been talking about a past relationship or a joke I wasn't getting? I tried to focus on the movie again, but it was hard. The words kept running through my mind. A few minutes later, he said it again, more clearly this time. This is where it happened. I froze. He was staring straight ahead, but it wasn't like he was really watching the movie anymore. It was almost as if he was in a trance, like he was recalling something from his past that had nothing to do with the film we were watching. The way he said it made my stomach twist. It wasn't casual. It wasn't a throwaway line. It sounded like something that had haunted him, something important, something that I wasn't supposed to hear. Jake, I asked, my voice trembling a little. What do you mean? This is where it happened. He turned to look at me, blinking, like he was just now coming back to the present moment. He smiled again, but it was different this time. Forced, strained. Sorry, just got lost in thought for a second, he said, his voice a little too upbeat. Don't mind me. I wasn't convinced. Something was off, and I could feel it deep in my gut. I glanced at the screen, then back at him. But as I was about to say something, he repeated it again. This time it was louder, more insistent. I can't let her go. My heart skipped a beat. I turned to face him completely, no longer caring about the movie. This wasn't just some weird offhand comment. There was something more to it, something in his tone that felt too intense for a casual movie night. Who? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Who can't you let go? Jake's eyes went wide for a second, like he had no idea who I was talking about. Then slowly he seemed to snap back to reality, blinking several times before offering a nervous laugh. Sorry. I've been a little stressed lately, he said, still not looking at me. His hand trembled as he reached for his drink. Just don't mind me. But it didn't feel right. This wasn't the same guy I had been talking to. This wasn't the Jake I had been texting with, the easygoing guy who had been so open and kind. This was someone else, someone who seemed trapped in their own head. And that's when I realized it. He wasn't talking to me at all. He wasn't even aware I was there. He was reading lines. The weird thing was, they weren't just random lines. They were about me. I watched in disbelief as he leaned back, staring at the screen again, and then repeated the words I had just said earlier. It wasn't normal. It wasn't something anyone would do. I'm sorry, I'll try to relax, he murmured, almost like he was apologizing to himself. And that's when I saw it. The script. He had a piece of paper in his lap, just out of view, but it was clear now. I could see the edges of it poking out, and I realized he was reading lines from a script. He wasn't improvising. He wasn't just talking casually. The words he was saying, the ones that didn't make sense, he had been reading them. They weren't random. They were planned, and they were my words. I stared at the paper, and everything clicked into place. The details. The way he knew exactly what I liked, what I'd told him about my past, about the way I liked my coffee. How did he know all of this? How did he know so much about me before we had even met in person? The script wasn't just some general thing. It was about me. Every line, every word was written about my life, my fears, my favorite places, even things I had only mentioned in passing during our conversations. How could he have possibly known all of this? Panic started rising in my chest. I needed to get out of there. I needed to leave, but my legs felt frozen. I tried to stand, but Jake wasn't finished. "This is where she always said she felt safe," he murmured, still not looking at me, his eyes fixed on the screen. "But she never understood that safety is an illusion." I felt a cold sweat break out along my back. My head was spinning. I couldn't think straight. What was happening? Why was he reading this script? Who was he? I couldn't take it anymore. I stood up, my body moving without thinking. I grabbed my bag, my hands shaking as I tried to force myself to calm down. Jake looked up, a confused expression on his face. But it wasn't a normal look. It was like he hadn't recognized me. Like he was seeing me for the first time. "What's wrong?" he asked, sounding genuinely puzzled. I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. I just ran out of his apartment, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't look back. I don't think I'll ever look back. I never heard from Jake again, and his profile vanished from the app. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I wonder if I'll ever escape that night. The feeling of being watched, of my life being turned into a story that someone else was reading from a script. I don't know what Jake was trying to do or who he really was, but I'm never going back to dating apps again. It was a Tuesday when I matched with her. Her name was Jenna, and at first she seemed like the perfect match. Her profile picture showed her with long dark hair and this gorgeous smile that made it clear she was someone you could talk to for hours. We hit it off right away. It wasn't just the usual small talk. We started chatting about things that mattered to both of us, our hobbies, our favorite books, our travel experiences. I was surprised by how easy it was to talk to her. She was funny, thoughtful, and genuinely seemed interested in me. After a few days of texting, she asked me if I wanted to join her for a weekend retreat. She had rented a secluded cabin in the woods, a place where we could relax and disconnect from everything. At first, I was hesitant. I mean, we had only been talking for a few days, and a cabin in the middle of nowhere sounded a little too isolated. But the more we talked, the more she convinced me that it would be a great experience. She was charming, and everything seemed perfect, so I agreed. She sent me the directions, an address about 2 hours outside of town, tucked deep into the woods. She told me I would love the quiet, the peacefulness of it all. No distractions, no people, just the two of us. She even mentioned that she liked having time to herself, to find peace away from the chaos of her everyday life. It sounded nice, honestly. So, I packed up a bag, made sure to bring enough clothes for the weekend, and headed out on a Friday afternoon. As I drove deeper into the woods, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. The further I got, the quieter it became, with nothing but the occasional bird chirping and the sound of the road beneath my tires. It was exactly what I needed. I hadn't realized how much stress had built up in my life until I started to drive toward that cabin. When I arrived, things immediately felt off. There was a strange stillness in the air. No other cars around, no signs of life. The cabin sat in the middle of a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. It looked like something out of a horror movie, but I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I told myself it was just the isolation giving me that uneasy feeling. I parked my car in front of the cabin, and before I even got out, I saw her standing on the porch. Jenna was beautiful, just like in her photos. But something about the way she was standing there waiting for me made me feel uncertain. Her expression was soft, but there was something behind her eyes that didn't quite match the smile on her face. She greeted me warmly and led me inside. The cabin was nice, cozy and well decorated, with wooden floors and a large stone fireplace. It had that rustic charm I had expected, but as I took in the surroundings, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. It was almost like the air itself felt heavy. She showed me around, offering me a drink, and we sat on the couch to chat. The conversation flowed naturally, and I began to relax a little. Everything was fine, or at least I thought it was. But as the evening wore on, I started to notice the first signs that something wasn't right. Jenna would occasionally pause mid-sentence, like she was waiting for something or someone. Her eyes would drift off into the distance, staring at nothing in particular, and then she'd blink, almost like she was coming back to the present moment. Each time it happened, I felt a chill creep up my spine. I brushed it off. Maybe she was just tired, or maybe the isolation was getting to her. I didn't want to overthink it. Then came the moment that really threw me off. We were sitting in front of the fire, having a casual conversation when she suddenly stopped, her eyes fixed on me, her body unnaturally still. She didn't blink for what felt like an eternity. "I'm not alone here," she said, her voice soft but firm. I didn't know what to say. She had been acting normal up until this point, but now her words seemed out of place. I looked at her, unsure if she was joking. I asked her what she meant, but she didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at me like she was waiting for something, or maybe like she was expecting something. "My other two personalities are already expecting you," she added, still staring at me with that same unblinking gaze. I froze. Was she serious? I didn't know how to respond. I tried to laugh it off, but the nervous laugh that escaped my lips only made me feel worse. I tried to tell myself it was just a weird joke, a quirk of hers that I didn't understand yet, but the way she said it, it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like something darker, something buried deep beneath her calm exterior. I asked her what she meant by personalities. I had no idea if she was talking about mental health issues or something else. It felt like the conversation had taken a sharp turn into uncomfortable territory. She slowly stood up, her movements slow, deliberate. "It's okay," she said, but her tone had shifted. It wasn't comforting anymore. It was almost like she was explaining something she had no control over. "You'll see them soon. They've been waiting." My heart started to race. This wasn't normal. She wasn't acting like someone who just had a quirky personality. She was talking about something deeper, something that felt dangerous. I wanted to leave. I should have left right then, but I didn't. I felt trapped in that cabin, like the walls were closing in on me. Jenna went to the window and stared outside, her back to me. I was about to get up and leave when I heard it. Soft footsteps behind me. At first, I thought it was her, but when I turned around, there was no one there. My pulse quickened. I tried to shake it off. Maybe it was just the floorboards creaking. But then I heard it again, closer this time, as if someone was moving around the cabin. I stood up, cautiously walking toward the door, but just as I reached for the handle, Jenna turned around. Her eyes were different now. There was something almost alien about the way she was looking at me. She wasn't smiling anymore. "You're not going anywhere," she said, her voice eerily calm. It felt like I was frozen in place, caught in the grip of something I couldn't see or understand. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I felt my breath catch in my throat. The temperature in the room dropped. My mind raced, but I couldn't think of anything to say or do. Suddenly, there was a noise behind me. I turned quickly to find another figure standing in the doorway. It was her, another version of her. But this one looked different, colder, somehow detached. She didn't speak, but just her presence was enough to send a wave of fear through me. Before I could process what was happening, a third figure appeared from the corner of the room. She looked like Jenna, but her expression was wild, almost manic. She stared at me like I was some kind of intruder, her lips twitching like she wanted to say something but couldn't. That's when I realized the woman standing in front of me wasn't just one person. There were three. Three personalities, each taking over at different times, and they had been waiting for me. I don't know how I got out of that cabin. All I remember is running through the woods, the sound of footsteps behind me growing louder with each passing second. I don't know what happened to Jenna or the other two. I don't even know if they were real. But I haven't been back to that cabin, and I've never heard from her again. Her profile is gone from the app, and I don't want to know what happened to her. But every now and then I hear her voice in my head, whispering, "We've been waiting for you." I met him on a dating app, just like everyone else. His name was Eric, and right from the start, he seemed perfect. His profile was the kind of thing that made you feel like you were talking to someone who had their life together, a good job, a love of travel, great taste in music. His photos weren't overly posed, just casual shots of him hiking, smiling, living. I wasn't sure if I was reading too much into it, but he seemed like the kind of guy you could see yourself spending time with. We clicked immediately, chatting about everything from our favorite books to random thoughts that popped into our heads late at night. After a few days of texting, we decided to meet up for dinner. He suggested a quiet little Italian place in the city, nothing too fancy, but just enough to set the right tone. I was nervous, but also excited. We hadn't talked about anything too serious yet, but I felt this pull towards him, like I could see a future with him, even though I didn't know much about him. When I walked into the restaurant, I saw him sitting at a corner table. He was even more handsome in person, tall, dark hair, and those blue eyes that made you feel like he could read your mind. The moment he stood up to greet me, I was hooked. He had that easy confidence about him, the kind that makes you feel comfortable instantly. We sat down, and the night began like any other dinner date. We laughed, talked about our jobs, our families, our experiences. He seemed really easy to talk to, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was actually connecting with someone. I couldn't remember the last time a date had gone so smoothly. It was as if everything was falling into place. But then, halfway through dinner, something strange happened. Eric stopped mid-sentence. His fork was hovering above his plate, and for a moment, he just stared at me like he was studying me. His face was calm, almost unreadable, but there was something in his eyes, a distant, faraway look that I hadn't noticed before. I waited, unsure what to say, when he finally spoke. His voice was softer now, almost serious. "I've been dead for 2 years." I blinked, trying to process what he had just said. Surely I had misheard him. Maybe he was joking. I laughed nervously, but when I looked at his face, I realized it wasn't a joke. He wasn't smiling. His expression was steady, serious even. "You what?" I asked, trying to make sense of the words coming out of his mouth. "I've been dead for 2 years," he repeated, more calmly this time. "I was killed on the night we matched." My heart stopped. I stared at him, unsure how to react. Was he serious? Was this some kind of twisted joke? I opened my mouth to say something, but no words came out. I felt a wave of panic rise in my chest, the kind of panic that makes your breath catch in your throat. The air in the restaurant suddenly felt thicker, like I couldn't breathe properly. He seemed to notice my unease, but instead of offering any kind of explanation, he just looked at me, waiting for me to say something. I was trying to understand, trying to process his words, but everything felt like it was spinning. How could he be dead? How could he possibly be sitting in front of me right now, eating dinner, talking to me, when he claimed to have been killed 2 years ago? I finally managed to ask, my voice shaky, How did you?" "I was in a car accident," he explained, his voice flat, like he was reciting a fact from a textbook. "It was a hit and run. The driver never stopped. It was quick. No pain. I died on the night we matched." But his voice trailed off, and for a moment I thought I saw a flicker of something in his eyes, something deeper than what he had been saying. "But I can still feel you." I sat there frozen, my mind racing with questions I couldn't even begin to ask. Was this some kind of delusion? Was he messing with me? It felt too surreal to be real, but at the same time, the way he was looking at me, the way he spoke, it felt like he believed every word. I wanted to leave. I wanted to get up, walk out of that restaurant, and pretend I had never heard any of this, but my body wouldn't move. I was paralyzed, caught between the need to run and the need to understand what he was saying. I couldn't just let it go. Something told me I had to know the truth. "What do you mean you can still feel me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. My heart was pounding, and the noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away, like we were the only 2 people in the room. He leaned forward, his hands clasped together on the table. His eyes never left mine, and his gaze felt deeper than it ever had before. "I can feel your energy. When I look at you and I talk to you, I can feel everything. I can feel the connection we have. I can feel your heartbeat. I can feel your breath. It's like I'm still alive when I'm with you, but only when we're together." I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell him to stop, that this wasn't happening, that it couldn't be happening. But I was too afraid to say anything. All I could do was stare at him, trying to wrap my mind around what he was saying. Was this some kind of sick joke? A twisted prank? But the more I looked at him, the more I felt like he wasn't lying. He wasn't joking. "What do you want from me?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I want to be with you," he said simply. "I want to stay with you. I can't go anywhere else. You're the only person who makes me feel alive again." The air between us grew heavier, and I felt trapped. I could feel the weight of his words pressing on me, suffocating me. How could this be real? How could he be sitting across from me, talking about death like it was just another thing in his life, something he had accepted? I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what to do. All I could think about was how he was dead. How he had been dead for 2 years, and yet here he was across from me, looking so alive. "You're not the only one who can feel things," I whispered, almost to myself. "I can feel you too. But this isn't real, is it?" He didn't answer at first. He just stared at me, his gaze intense, and for a moment I saw something flicker in his eyes, a recognition, like he understood what I was saying, but at the same time, he didn't want to believe it. "I know it's not," he said finally, his voice soft, "but I can't leave. I don't know how." I stood up, shaking now, my hands gripping the back of my chair as I tried to steady myself. The weight of the situation was overwhelming, and I couldn't breathe. I couldn't stay there any longer. I needed to get out. I had to get out. I walked out of the restaurant without another word, my mind racing, my heart pounding. I looked back. I couldn't. That night, I'd locked his number, deleted the app, and did my best to forget everything he had said. But sometimes when I close my eyes, I can still see his face. I can still hear his voice, telling me that he's still with me, that he can still feel me. And now, every time my phone buzzes, I wonder if it's him. I don't know what it was that made me swipe right. Honestly, most of the time I'm pretty skeptical of dating apps. They're full of weirdos and fake profiles, and I've heard my fair share of horror stories. But then I came across Rachel's profile, and something about it felt different. Her photos were the usual staged, overly polished shots you see all over these apps. She was sitting in a cafe in one picture, laughing with friends. In another, she was standing in front of a mural in the city, a wide grin on her face. She looked real. She looked fun. She looked like someone I could actually talk to. We started texting, and right off the bat, I was hooked. She was easy to talk to, and we had so much in common. We joked about silly things, swapped stories about our childhoods, and even shared our favorite movies. There wasn't any of that awkwardness you sometimes feel when texting someone new. It was just natural. After a few days of texting back and forth, she invited me to a surprise date. At first, I was a little wary. I didn't know what she meant by surprise, but I figured, why not? I had a good feeling about her. Maybe it was impulsive, but I trusted my instincts. She said I should meet her at an old mansion just outside of town, one that she said her family had owned for years. I was curious, but I didn't think much of it. We talked about the house before. She mentioned that it was a place full of memories, that it had a certain charm. So I went along with it. The direction she sent me led me further out of the city, down winding roads that seemed to disappear into the woods. As I got closer, I started to wonder if I was in the right place. The mansion was tucked back from the road, hidden behind a large gate and surrounded by overgrown hedges. It didn't look like it had been maintained for years. The windows were dusty, and the stone steps leading to the front door were cracked and uneven. I parked my car in the driveway, feeling a little uneasy. The place had an eerie vibe to it, like it was stuck in time. Still, I convinced myself it was just the setting. A creepy mansion always gives off that vibe, right? Maybe it was just part of the surprise. I rang the doorbell, and Rachel answered immediately. She was wearing a simple dress, nothing fancy, but it somehow looked perfect on her. She greeted me with a smile that was so warm, I forgot about the weirdness of the place for a moment. It was like meeting an old friend, even though we'd only been talking for a short time. "Come on in," she said, her voice soft and inviting. "I've been waiting for you." I followed her inside, and it was just as I expected: creaky wooden floors, old furniture, and a smell of something faintly musty, like the house had been locked up for years. The walls were lined with faded paintings, and the dim lighting gave the entire place a mysterious air. It was definitely the kind of place you'd expect to find in a Gothic novel. Rachel led me through the house, showing me a few rooms that looked like they hadn't been touched in ages. She didn't seem bothered by the decay, though. She moved through the house with a kind of ease, like she had spent her whole life there. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. A house felt too quiet. And the longer I was there, the more it felt like I was being watched, like there were eyes on me from every corner. She finally stopped in front of a room at the end of the hall. The door was slightly ajar, and I could see faint light spilling out into the hallway. Rachel looked at me, her expression serious but calm. "This is where we'll spend the evening," she said. "I have something to show to you." I nodded, though I felt a sense of dread settling in my stomach. It was like I had just crossed some invisible line, and I wasn't sure if I was ready for whatever was behind that door. She pushed the door open, and my heart skipped a beat. There were 3 women standing in the room, each one looking eerily like Rachel. But at the same time, they were different. One of them had a soft smile, while another had her arms crossed, her expression dark and brooding. The third one looked almost confused, like she wasn't sure where she was. I stood frozen in the doorway, not sure what to say or do. Rachel, or the one who was standing in front of me, smiled at me again, but it was a different smile this time, something a little more unsettling. "These are my other personalities," she said, her voice calm. "They've been waiting for you." I blinked, not sure if I had heard her right. "Other personalities?" I asked, my voice wavering. Was this some kind of joke? Had I stumbled into some weird role-play scenario that I didn't understand? But no one laughed. The three women in the room continued to stare at me, and Rachel, who, at this point, didn't feel like the same person I had been talking to, motioned for me to come inside. "They're all part of me," she continued, "but we can't exist together. So we fight for control. They all think they're the real Rachel." The woman on the left, the one who had the soft smile, took a step forward. "I'm the real one," she said, her voice sweet but firm. "I'm the one who belongs here." The woman on the right, the one with her arms crossed, scoffed. "No, you're not. I'm the real Rachel. You've always been too soft." The third one, the one who looked confused, just stood there, staring at the floor. She didn't speak, but there was a sadness in her eyes, something I couldn't quite place. I felt like I was trapped in a nightmare. I looked at Rachel, the one standing in front of me, the one who seemed most like the woman I had been talking to. She wasn't smiling anymore. Her eyes were cold, distant. "They all want to be the real me," she said, her voice now echoing with a kind of bitterness I hadn't heard before. "But I'm the only one who can exist. They can't stay." I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run. But there was no way out. The door had closed behind me, and the three women in front of me were now arguing, each one louder than the other, each one claiming to be the real Rachel. The argument grew more intense, voices blending together, until it felt like I was drowning in their words. Then, in the midst of the chaos, Rachel, the one I had been talking to, turned to me with a smile that was far too wide. "You'll have to choose," she said, her voice sweet and calm again. "Which one is the real me?" I backed away, my body trembling, my mind reeling from everything that was happening. I didn't know how to respond. I didn't know what to do. But before I could say anything, I felt the pressure in the room intensify. It was like the air had thickened, and I was being suffocated by it. The three versions of Rachel kept arguing, but their voices seemed to distort, becoming something inhuman, something twisted. I didn't think. I just ran. I bolted out of that room, out of the house, not looking back until I was safely in my car. My heart was pounding in my chest, and my hands were shaking as I drove away from the mansion, the sound of their voices still ringing in my ears. I haven't contacted Rachel since that night. Her profile is gone, and I've deleted the app. I don't know what happened in that mansion, and I don't want to know. But sometimes late at night, I still hear the echo of her voice, asking me which one was the real her. It started like any other first date from a dating app. His name was Derek, and we had been texting for a few days. He seemed nice enough, good sense of humor, into the same music and movies as me, the usual stuff. Nothing particularly special about him, but I had a decent feeling about it. He suggested we meet at a coffee shop downtown. Simple, low pressure, the kind of first date I liked. When I showed up, I wasn't immediately thrown off by anything. He was sitting at a table by the window looking out at the street. He looked exactly like his pictures, tall, dark hair, dressed casually but well. As I walked over to him, I felt a weird sense of recognition. For a second, I thought maybe I'd seen him around before, but I couldn't place it. I'd dated a lot of guys over the years, so I chalked it up to just one of those faces you think you recognize but really don't. "Hey, Derek," I said, standing next to his table. He looked up, and the smile he gave me was warm, almost a little too warm, like he was expecting me. "Yeah, that's me," he said, getting up to greet me. There was something about the way he said it that felt rehearsed, like it was just part of the script he had in his head. But I ignored that. I wasn't about to get paranoid over nothing. We sat down, ordered drinks, and started talking. At first, everything was fine. We talked about music, movies, the usual small talk. But the longer we sat there, the more I started to feel like something wasn't quite right. There was this odd tension in the air, like he was studying me more than just having a conversation. And then it hit me. He was familiar. Not in the I've seen you around town kind of way. No, it was deeper than that. It was like I had seen him before, but not just as a random face. I'd known him before. My heart skipped a beat as I tried to place where I had seen him. I kept glancing at him, trying to figure it out, and he seemed to notice. He wasn't acting nervous, but he wasn't acting relaxed either. It was almost like he was waiting for me to say something. Finally, I just had to ask, "You look really familiar. Have we met before?" I tried to sound casual, but I could hear the unease creeping into my voice. He tilted his head slightly, like he was processing my question. Then he gave me a slow smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. "No," he said, shaking his head. "But I feel like I know you too. Maybe it's just the vibe or something." He laughed, but it didn't sound genuine. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. But what could I do? It wasn't like I could just get up and leave. We were already having the date, and maybe it was just nerves messing with me. As we continued talking, though, it got worse. He would make comments that seemed to know things about me, things that I hadn't told him. Simple stuff at first, like the fact that I loved horror movies, or that I had a cat named Luna. But then, it got more specific. He knew I liked to read on the weekends, that I hated crowded places, that I was allergic to peanuts. At first, I thought Mega had mentioned some of this in passing when we were texting, but as the list of details piled up, I started to get uneasy. How could he know this stuff? And then, as I was trying to process all of this, he dropped the bombshell. "I know about your ex too, he said, his voice so casual that it almost sent chills down my spine. "The one you broke up with right before we matched. I know how he treated you. I know exactly what happened." I froze. My ex. I didn't even talk about my ex much. Sure, I'd mentioned the breakup a few times, but nothing in detail. I certainly didn't get into specifics about how it ended. My stomach twisted. How could he possibly know all of this? I looked at him, my heart hammering in my chest. "How do you know about that?" My voice cracked. This wasn't just a casual date anymore. Something was seriously wrong. His eyes darkened just slightly, but his smile stayed in place. "I know more than you think," he said, his tone almost condescending. "You've been part of the plan for a while." The way he said it sent a spike of fear through me. Plan? What plan? Was this some kind of joke? I stood out, suddenly feeling like I couldn't breathe. I needed to get out of there. But before I could say anything, he grabbed my wrist, gently but firmly, and it was like a switch flipped. I felt the temperature drop. My skin prickled, and I could feel his fingers pressing into me in a way that made my blood run cold. "Don't run," he said quietly, his voice almost a whisper. "I'm not finished yet." I pulled away quickly, stumbling back. My heart was pounding in my chest, and I could feel the panic rising in my throat. I turned to leave, but the door to the cafe was too far. I felt like the walls were closing in on me. And then, as I turned back toward him, he smiled that same cold smile. But this time there was something different in his eyes, something dark. "You should have known," he said, his voice almost casual now. "You ghosted my father years ago, and he's never been able to move on. Neither have I." It hit me like a freight train. I remembered now his father. That name from the past, that profile from the app. It clicked into place like a jigsaw puzzle. I had ghosted his father years ago. We had talked for a bit, but I ended it abruptly after a weird vibe I'd gotten from him. I never thought twice about it. Just one of those things you do when someone doesn't feel right. But now standing there, I realized what a mistake that had been. Derek wasn't here just for a date. He was here for revenge. He wasn't just trying to get to know me. He wasn't even trying to be nice. This was all planned. Every word he'd said, every little detail about me that seemed too coincidental, it had all been calculated. He knew exactly what to say to get under my skin, to make me feel trapped. "You ghosted him," Derek said again, almost like it was a mantra. "Now I'm here to make you pay." I didn't know what he meant by that. Was he going to hurt me? Was he going to do something worse? My mind was racing with 100 different possibilities, but none of them made sense. This couldn't be happening. Before I could react, I heard a voice behind me. Another voice, unfamiliar and cold. "You didn't think you'd get away that easy, did you?" I turned quickly and saw another man standing at the entrance of the cafe. He looked just like Derek. Same height, same dark hair, same cold eyes. My heart dropped into my stomach. There was no way out. Derek's smile widened as he saw my panic. "You've been marked for a long time," he said softly. "You didn't just ghost him, you ghosted us." I didn't wait to hear more. I ran. My heart was in my throat. my feet barely touching the ground as I sprinted out of the cafe. I didn't look back. I don't know what Derek's plan was or why his father's revenge was so important to him, but I don't plan on finding out. I deleted my dating app the second I got home, and I've been too scared to look back at anything connected to that night. I blocked all of their numbers, but I still don't feel safe. Every time I see someone who looks even remotely like Derek, my heart races, and I wonder if he's still out there. I don't know what I was supposed to learn from that date, but I know one thing. Sometimes the past can come back to haunt you in ways you never expect. It started like any other dating app match. You know the routine: swipe right, start chatting, and see if there's any real connection. But with her, it felt different right from the beginning. Her name was Jessica, and from the moment we started texting, there was something magnetic about her. She was witty, charming, and everything about her seemed to align with what I was looking for. She had that perfect balance of being approachable yet mysterious, the kind of woman who could keep a conversation going without making it feel forced. Her photos were stunning too, photos that looked like they came straight out of a fashion magazine. Every single shot was flawless, and it wasn't the usual overly edited stuff you see on dating apps. She looked real, yet too perfect at the same time. There was something about her smile, something in her eyes that made me think she was hiding a secret. But I'm not the kind of guy who judges by pictures. I thought maybe I was just overthinking it. After a few days of texting, we decided to meet. She suggested a dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, the kind of place with dim lighting, candles on every table, and a cozy atmosphere. I liked the idea. We met up, and she was even more beautiful in person. Everything about her screamed confidence, her posture, the way she carried herself. She had an air of mystery about her that I couldn't quite figure out. But as the night went on, everything felt natural. We laughed, talked about everything under the sun, and I could feel myself getting more and more interested in her. Dinner was perfect. The conversation was easy. She was the kind of woman who made you forget about time, and by the time the meal was over, I felt like we could have spent hours more just talking. But then came the goodbye. I'm not one to rush things, and I didn't want to overstep, but I felt like a kiss was the natural next step. As I leaned in, my heart started to race. This was the moment where everything could either go really well or fall flat. I wasn't nervous about the kiss itself, but something about her, about this whole night, felt like it was building up to something. When I got close enough, I saw her smile again, this time softer, more inviting. I closed the gap, and as I was about to kiss her, something caught my eye. It was small at first, almost imperceptible, a slight twitch along the edge of her jaw. I pulled back slightly, confused, and that's when it happened. Her skin began to peel away. I don't know how to explain it. It wasn't like a burn or an injury. It was more like her skin was lifting off, like it was a mask being removed from her face. It started at the edges of her jaw, the skin softening, lifting off in small sheets, like it was coming apart in strips. My heart stopped, and everything around me suddenly felt wrong. The smooth, flawless skin that had been so perfect moments ago was now slipping away to reveal another face. My mind raced. I didn't know what to think. What's happening? Was I hallucinating? This couldn't be real. The face beneath wasn't just different. It was completely unfamiliar. She didn't look like herself anymore. The woman who had been sitting across from me, smiling and laughing, was now someone else. Her features were different, more angular, her eyes darker, her lips thinner. The skin that had once been flawless was now pale and almost translucent, and beneath it, I could see the muscles underneath, the structure of her face, like I was looking at a mask slowly coming off. She smiled at me like nothing was wrong, as if her face peeling away was just another normal thing. My stomach churned, and a wave of nausea hit me. I needed a new identity, she said, her voice still smooth and calm, despite the bizarre transformation happening before my eyes. The words sent a chill through me like they were the most casual thing in the world. I didn't know what to do. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of it. Was this some kind of joke? Was she wearing some kind of special effects makeup or undergoing some weird transformation for a movie? But the feeling in the air was too real. This wasn't a prank, and it wasn't some special effect. This was happening in front of me. I took a step back, my body frozen in shock. She reached up, her fingers gently peeling more of the skin away from her face, like she was adjusting her mask. Underneath, her features continued to change, almost fluidly, shifting from one person to another. It wasn't like her appearance was changing just in one place. It was as if she was rearranging herself, molding into different versions of herself, each one a different person. I couldn't breathe. My thoughts were jumbled. Was this some sort of possession? Some kind of identity theft that went too far? Was this a person who could change their form, their face, their identity at will? Why? I asked, my voice barely audible. I wasn't sure if I was speaking to her or to whatever was happening to her. I needed answers, and I needed them now. But she just looked at me, her smile widening. I needed a new identity, she repeated, like it was the simplest thing in the world. And you, well, you've been so interesting. I thought I'd give this version of me a try. A fresh start, you know. I wanted to run. I needed to get out of there, but my legs felt like they were glued to the floor. My body was shaking, and the fear I had been trying to suppress was rising, overwhelming me. I felt like I was trapped, like something was controlling the situation, and I was powerless to stop it. As the mask continued to peel away, the face beneath started to change again. It wasn't just her face. It was like she was becoming someone entirely different. Her eyes turned dark, almost black, and her lips curled into a smile that was now twisted, cruel, and mocking. I took a few steps back, my heart racing in my chest. The woman, if she could even be called that anymore, stood up slowly, her movements deliberate, almost predatory. The transformation wasn't finished yet. The skin that had peeled away wasn't just lying there, it was reforming. It looked like it was coming back together, becoming whole again, but with something different underneath. Something not human. I couldn't take it anymore. I ran. I don't even remember how I got out of there. I just know that I had to get away from her, from whatever she had become. I bolted out the door, down the street, and into the first alley I could find, my heart pounding so loudly in my ears that I could barely hear myself think. That was the last time I ever saw her. I deleted the dating app, blocked her number, and told myself I would never think about that night again. But no matter how hard I try, I can't forget what I saw. And sometimes late at night, when I close my eyes, I still feel like someone is watching me, waiting to peel away my skin and take on a new face. I had been talking to him for months, maybe longer than that. His name was Andrew, and I thought I had found something real. He was everything I wanted in a guy: charming, funny, thoughtful, and always so easy to talk to. We had the kind of conversations where hours passed like minutes, and every text felt like a piece of something bigger. We talked about everything: our childhoods, our dreams, our favorite books, and how we both loved long walks in the park. We even joked about how we'd eventually meet and what our first date would be like. He always had a way of making everything feel like it was part of some great story. And honestly, I was excited when he suggested we finally meet in person. At first, I was a little hesitant. I'd had my fair share of bad experiences with online dating, and I wasn't sure if I was ready to trust someone I'd only known through a screen. But Andrew's sincerity shone through. We had shared so many personal details, and it felt like we already knew each other so well. He reassured me that he was real, and everything about him seemed genuine. I had no reason not to believe him. So when he asked if I wanted to meet at a restaurant he loved, I agreed. He gave me the name of the place, a quaint little bistro just on the edge of town. I didn't know it, but it sounded nice. He told me it was quiet, peaceful, and perfect for getting to know each other. It sounded ideal for our first meeting. He even promised me that it wasn't too fancy, so I wouldn't have to worry about dressing up too much. I liked that. When I arrived, I was immediately struck by how empty the place felt. There were no cars in the parking lot, which was unusual for a restaurant at that time of day. I double-checked the address to make sure I was in the right spot, but it was the one he had mentioned. It was a small, tucked-away bistro with old brick walls and big windows that let in the light. The restaurant had an antique charm to it, with soft music playing in the background and candles flickering on every table. It was pretty, but there was something odd about the silence that surrounded it. It wasn't peaceful. It was unsettling. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but there was a strange tension in the air. I walked in, and the waiter greeted me immediately. He was an older man, tall with gray hair, wearing a white shirt and black apron. He smiled at me, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. Something about him seemed off. Still, I smiled back, trying to shake the feeling of unease. "Are you here for a reservation?" he asked, his voice smooth but distant. Yeah, I'm meeting someone. His name's Andrew. The waiter didn't respond at first. He just stared at me for a moment, his eyes flicking up and down. It was almost as if he was searching for something, like he was trying to place me. But then he nodded slowly and gestured to a table in the back. Right this way, he said, his voice colder than before. I followed him to the table, noticing how empty the restaurant was. There wasn't a single other person in sight. The tables were all set, the lights dimmed, but it felt like something was missing. No other conversations, no clinking of glasses, just an eerie stillness that made my skin crawl. I sat down, and the waiter left without saying another word. I checked my phone, expecting a text from Andrew telling me he had arrived. But there was nothing. I felt a knot form in my stomach. Maybe he had been running late, or maybe something had come up. I tried not to let my mind wander, but the longer I waited, the more the silence pressed in around me. Minutes passed, and then finally I saw him. Andrew walked in through the door, looking just as I remembered from his photos. Tall, dark hair, a soft smile that immediately put me at ease. But as he walked toward me, something felt different. There was something in the way he moved, almost like he was too confident, too practiced. Hey, he said with a smile, sitting down across from me. I'm so glad you could make it. I smiled back, though something about his presence made me uneasy. He was exactly as I remembered him, yet there was an oddness to him. His smile seemed a little too wide, and his eyes didn't quite match the warmth in his expression. Of course, I replied, trying to shake the feeling. It's good to finally meet you. We talked for a while, and at first it was fine. The conversation was easy, just like it had been over text. But as the evening went on, I started to notice little things. His responses felt too perfect, almost as if he had memorized everything I'd said to him before. He would mention specific details I had shared weeks ago, but it was like he was saying them just a little too perfectly, as if he had rehearsed them. He kept talking, telling me about his work, his hobbies, and his favorite books, but something was off. Every time I tried to steer the conversation in a new direction, he'd quickly loop it back to something I had mentioned earlier. It was like he was following some script, not just having a real conversation. The waiter returned a few minutes later, setting down a glass of water for me, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there for a moment, staring at Andrew. I could feel the tension between them, like the waiter was waiting for something. But when Andrew smiled at him, the waiter quickly looked away and walked off. Andrew, completely unaware of the weirdness of the interaction, continued talking, but now his words felt hollow. I could hear his voice, but my mind wasn't really processing it anymore. My eyes kept drifting back to the waiter. It wasn't until I saw the waiter again, standing in the corner watching us, that I started to panic. I looked at Andrew, and it hit me like a ton of bricks. The man sitting across from me, the man who seemed so familiar, wasn't him. He was too perfect. His every movement, his every word, felt rehearsed, like he had memorized this persona to play in front of me. Andrew, I said, my voice trembling, is everything okay? You seem different. He stopped mid-sentence, his smile frozen for a moment. There was a flicker in his eyes, something dark that made my heart race. He blinked twice, then his smile returned, but this time it was wider, almost too wide. Of course I'm fine, he said, his voice smooth. Everything is exactly as it should be. The waiter walked past us again, this time stopping just a few feet away, and said, Andrew, your meal will be out shortly. I froze. Wait, I said, standing up. My mind was racing and a sick feeling settled in my stomach. What did you say? The waiter looked back at me, his expression blank. Andrew, your meal will be out shortly. We have everything prepared for you. It was like he wasn't even looking at me. He was looking right at Andrew, and that's when it hit me. No one else had said anything to me. No one else had even acknowledged my presence. The waiter kept repeating Andrew's name like it was the only thing that mattered. And Andrew, whoever this man was, wasn't even reacting to it. He was playing his part in a script, but it wasn't for me. It was for the waiter, for the restaurant, for a story I wasn't supposed to understand. I grabbed my bag and bolted for the door, my heart hammering in my chest. But when I looked back, I saw Andrew standing by the table, his smile still frozen on his face, his eyes following me. I'm glad you could finally make it, he said, his voice distant, almost mechanical. But you should have known, you were never meant to leave. I ran, not daring to look back as I dashed through the door and into the night. I didn't stop running until I was far away, my chest heaving, my mind reeling with everything that had just happened. I don't know when I walked into that night. All I know is that when I looked back at the bistro later that evening, it was completely dark. The lights were off. There were no cars in the parking lot, and no one remembered me. I had been texting Lily for a few weeks when we finally decided to meet. From our conversations, she seemed like the kind of girl I could really connect with, smart, funny, and down to earth. Her profile was filled with cute pictures of her traveling and having a good time with friends. She looked great, of course, but when we started texting, I felt like there was something deeper to her, something intriguing. We set up a date at a cozy little cafe downtown, but when I saw her in person, I was completely taken aback. She was even more stunning than in her pictures. Her long, dark hair framed her face perfectly, and her eyes had this hypnotic, magnetic quality to them. I felt a little out of my league just being there with her, but she was incredibly sweet and down to earth, making it easy to relax and talk. The conversation flowed effortlessly, and after a while, she suggested we go to her house. She said she had a few things to show me, and I figured, why not? It wasn't too late, and I was enjoying our time together. When we arrived at her house, though, something felt off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but as soon as I stepped through the front door, the air felt cold. Not like a chilly breeze or anything. No, it was like the temperature in the room dropped by 10 degrees all of a sudden, and it wasn't just me. I saw her shiver slightly as she walked past me, and the warmth of the day outside seemed to disappear entirely as we entered the house. The house itself was beautiful, old-fashioned, and full of character. It looked like one of those places you'd see in a movie. Big wooden beams across the ceiling, an antique chandelier hanging above us, and dark hardwood floors that creaked underfoot. There was an unsettling beauty to it, but as we walked deeper inside, I started to feel the shadows press a little too closely. The house felt like it was alive in some way, like it had a personality all its own, and I wasn't welcome there. Lily led me to the living room, where she asked me to sit down on the couch. She looked at me with those big, dark eyes of hers, and for the first time, I noticed something different about her expression. It wasn't fear exactly, more like sadness. Something haunted her, something hidden beneath the smile she had been wearing since we met. After a few moments of silence, she spoke up, her voice low and serious. She started telling me a story, and as she spoke, I realized that this wasn't just some random tale she was sharing. This was something that had been affecting her for a long time. I need to tell you something, she began, her eyes glancing around the room like she was checking for something, someone. This house, this place, it's cursed. I didn't know what to think at first. Cursed? Was she joking? I chuckled, thinking she was just trying to scare me, but the look on her face stopped me cold. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't playing a joke. She looked deadly serious. My ex, she continued, her voice trembling slightly. He did something to me. Something I can't undo. I raised an eyebrow, confused but intrigued. This was getting heavy, and I wasn't sure how to respond. But she didn't give me a chance to speak. She went on, describing a relationship that seemed to spiral into something far darker than anything I could have imagined. She told me about her ex, how controlling he was, how manipulative. He had been obsessed with her, and when she finally broke up with him, he didn't take it well. It wasn't just that he stalked her. It wasn't just that he wouldn't leave her alone. He had done something supernatural, something that bound her to him in a way she couldn't explain. As she spoke, the atmosphere in the room grew even colder, and I could feel the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed to grow darker, stretching and shifting, as though they were reaching out to her. I wanted to say something to comfort her, but the words didn't come. He cursed me, she said softly. He trapped me here, in this house, and now he's watching us. He's always watching. I didn't know what to say to that. I wanted to believe it was just her mind playing tricks, that maybe the stress of the breakup had caused her to imagine these things. But as I looked at her, really looked at her, I saw the fear in her eyes. And more than that, I felt it. It was real. Wait, I started to say, but before I could finish, something in the room changed. The temperature dropped again, and the shadows seemed to pulse with energy. A sudden chill swept through the room, more intense this time, and I could see my breath in the air. I stood up, suddenly feeling like I couldn't breathe. The walls seemed to close in around me, and the room felt smaller, suffocating. The only light in the room flickered as if the house itself was reacting to something. Lily's eyes darted around the room, and I could see her body tense up. It was like she was waiting for something. I glanced around, my heart pounding in my chest. I was starting to get really scared now. I had no idea what was happening, but I felt it. Something was wrong. Then, out of nowhere, I heard it, a soft whisper from behind me. It was faint at first, just a breath of air. But then it became clearer, like someone was standing right next to me, just on sight. "Lily, you shouldn't have brought him here." My skin crawled, and I whipped around, trying to locate the source of the voice. But there was nothing. No one there. Just the shadows, stretching across the walls. The whispering continued, soft and low, like it was coming from the very walls themselves. It was like the house was speaking to me, warning me. I turned to Lily, my voice shaking. Who's here?" I asked, almost whispering. "Who's talking?" Her eyes were wide with terror now. She reached out to grab my arm, her fingers cold, like ice. "He's here," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "He's always here, watching, waiting." I could see her face now, no longer the confident, calm woman I met earlier. She was pale, her lips trembling, her eyes darting around like she was trying to find a way out. "Lily, what's happening?" I asked, my voice growing more frantic. "Who is it? Who's trapped here with us?" She looked at me, her eyes filled with a deep, unbearable sorrow. "My ex," she said, her voice breaking. "He's still here. I can't escape him. He's part of this house now, and he won't let me go." The shadows seemed to move closer, creeping across the floor, twisting and stretching like they were alive. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body was frozen. Every instinct I had told me to get out, but I couldn't. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the room went silent. The temperature rose again, and the shadows retreated into the corners. I felt like I could breathe again, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still there, watching, waiting. I didn't stay long after that. Lily apologized again and again, but I couldn't take it anymore. I left the house in a daze, my heart racing, my mind reeling with everything she had said. I didn't know what was real and what wasn't. But when I looked back at the house, I saw a figure standing in one of the windows, just a silhouette watching me leave. I've never contacted Lily again. Her profile is gone, and I haven't been able to find her. But sometimes when I walk past old houses, I swear I can feel eyes on me. And I wonder if she's still trapped in that house with him, watching as the shadows close in around her. I never really believed in love at first sight or any of that cheesy stuff. But when I matched with Daniel on the dating app, there was just something about him. He had this calm, mysterious vibe that I found really attractive. His photos weren't the usual overly polished ones. No selfies with filters or vacation shots meant to show off. He looked normal, but in the best way. He had this rugged charm, like he could be someone who'd be in your life for years, not just a fleeting moment. We'd been chatting for a few days, and honestly, I was impressed. He wasn't like the other guys I'd talked to on there. It wasn't all just small talk. He asked thoughtful questions, shared interesting stories, and seemed to genuinely want to get to know me. So after some back and forth, we agreed to meet in person. I was nervous, as I always am, but I figured it was just a date. What could possibly go wrong? We decided to meet at a cozy cafe, one I'd been to a few times with friends. It was the perfect spot for a first date, quiet enough to talk, but not awkwardly empty. When I arrived, I saw him sitting at a table by the window looking out at the street. He stood up as soon as he saw me and smiled. And just like in his photos, he looked even better in person. He was tall, with a scruffy beard and deep brown eyes that made it hard to look away. He had on a simple jacket, but it looked effortless. Honestly, I couldn't help but feel a little self-conscious. I hadn't expected him to be so perfect. But then again, I liked that about him. No pretension, no over-the-top charm, just real. The date started like any other. We exchanged pleasantries, ordered our drinks, and started talking. The conversation flowed easily, and I felt comfortable around him. There wasn't any awkwardness. He made me laugh, and I was genuinely enjoying myself. It was as if we had known each other for years. But then, as we were getting deeper into the conversation, he said something that made my stomach drop. "I have a secret to tell you," Daniel said, looking serious all of a sudden. I raised an eyebrow, confused. "A secret?" I laughed nervously. "Okay, what's the big secret?" He hesitated for a moment, then said, almost casually, "I'm a time traveler." I blinked, unsure if I had heard him right. I chuckled at first, thinking he was joking or trying to be quirky. Maybe he was just trying to impress me or be funny, but something in his eyes told me he wasn't joking. He looked so serious, so deadpan. It felt like he was waiting for me to take him seriously. I laughed again, this time a little less confidently. "A time traveler, like Doctor Who or something," I said, trying to make light of it. I thought he'd laugh too, but he didn't. "I'm being serious," he said, his tone unchanged. "I'm from the future. I've been sent back to prevent something from happening." I stopped laughing. My mouth went dry. This was too weird. Was he messing with me? Was he testing my reaction? I tried to laugh it off. "Okay, sure. You're a time traveler. And I'm from the year 2087, right?" I smiled nervously, but he didn't smile back. "No," he said, his eyes intense. "I'm from 2035. I've been sent back because I need to stop an accident." I wasn't sure how to react. I didn't know whether to laugh it off, walk out, or just play along. "What accident?" I asked, my voice shaking a little. "What are you talking about?" For a moment, Daniel didn't answer. He just stared at me, his gaze piercing. It was like he was trying to read me. The silence between us felt thick and uncomfortable, and I started to feel like maybe I was in over my head. "You'll find out soon enough," he said finally. "But I've already seen it happen. I've seen the accident." At this point, I was convinced he was either messing with me or had some serious issues. But he continued, and that's when things really took a turn. "You were in a car accident 2 years ago," Daniel said. "I know you don't remember it, but you were driving home late one night, and the car swerved off the road. You didn't survive." I froze. My blood ran cold. How did he know that? How could he possibly know that? I'd never told anyone about the details of that night. It was something I tried to forget. The car crash had been a blur, one of those things that happens so quickly that you don't even process it until later. But no one else knew about it, not in the way he was describing. I tried to push the fear down. This couldn't be real. There was no way. I must have misheard him. He was just some guy trying to scare me, right? But the look on his face, the sincerity in his eyes, made my heart race in a way that wasn't from excitement. How do you know that?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "How do you know that happened?" Daniel leaned in closer, his voice lowering. "Because I'm here to stop it," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "I'm here to stop you from making the mistake that led to it." I couldn't speak. I felt like I was in a nightmare, trapped in a conversation that made no sense. Was I dreaming? Was this a prank? "I've seen it," he continued, his eyes intense. "I've seen the timeline. You're supposed to die in that accident, but you're not supposed to. You've got to make different choices. You have to change everything, or else you won't make it." By now, I could barely breathe. I didn't know what to do. Was he really a time traveler? Was any of this real? He had described the details of that night, details I had never shared with anyone. The way he spoke was calm, collected, too calm. "Are you saying I'm supposed to die?" I asked, my voice shaky. "And you've come back in time to stop it?" He nodded, leaning back in his chair, his expression almost sad. "You're not supposed to know this yet, but I have to tell you. You have to make sure you don't go down that road. I can't stop it for you, but I can guide you." I stared at him, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know whether to laugh it off or run out of the cafe screaming for help. This was too much, too far out of anything I could have ever imagined. "You're not the person I thought you were," I said, shaking my head. "This is insane. This is crazy." Dangle didn't get angry. He just nodded, as if he had expected this reaction. "I know it sounds crazy," he said, his voice low. "But you'll understand soon enough. Just remember what I told you. You have to change the course of your life, or the accident will happen." I stood up abruptly, my mind spinning. I didn't know what to think, what to believe. I wanted to run, to get away from him, from this insane conversation. "I can't do this," I said, my voice shaking. "I'm leaving." He didn't try to stop me. He just watched me leave, his gaze unchanging, as if he knew what was coming next. I've never heard from Daniel again. His profile disappeared the day after that date, and I haven't been able to find any trace of him online. I don't know if he was telling the truth or if it was all a joke, but I haven't been able to shake the feeling that there's more to it than I can understand. That night still haunts me. Every time I drive past the place where the accident happened, I wonder, what if I'd never made it out? What if he really was trying to save me? It started out pretty normal. I matched with Emma on the dating app, and we hit it off right away. Her profile said she was a psychic, and honestly, I didn't know what to make of it. I'd seen people say that on their profiles before, but I always assumed it was some kind of gimmick. I wasn't the type to buy into the whole psychic thing. My friends always joked about how skeptical I was, but I preferred to think logically about everything. Still, something about Emma's profile intrigued me. She seemed different, calm, grounded, and there was an energy in her pictures that made me think there was more to her than just a good smile. We messaged for a few days, and she was, well, amazing to talk to. We shared similar interests, movies, books, music, and the conversation just flowed. It felt easy, like we were old friends reconnecting rather than two strangers meeting on a dating app. There was this immediate connection, and honestly, I started to feel like maybe she was the one, or maybe I was just getting ahead of myself. Either way, I agreed to meet her in person. The date was set for a quiet cafe in the city. It wasn't the fanciest place, but it was intimate, the kind of spot that made you feel like you were away from the hustle and bustle of life. When I got there, I was early. I always was. I grabbed a coffee and sat by the window, trying to calm my nerves. The minutes seemed to drag, but then I saw her walking toward me. She looked exactly as she had in her pictures. Long dark hair, bright eyes, and that smile that just lit up the room. I stood up to greet her and she hugged me. The hug was warm and I immediately felt at ease. It felt like we were picking up right where we left off, even though we hadn't really met before. I think that's what made me feel so comfortable. We sat down and she started talking right away, telling me about her day. At first, it was normal, but then she said something that made me pause. I know you're a little skeptical of what I do, she said, almost like she had read my mind. But I promise you, I'm not here to impress you. I'm just here to get to know you. I smiled awkwardly, unsure how to respond. I didn't want to come off as rude, but I wasn't exactly the type to believe in the supernatural. I was still trying to figure out what she meant by what I do, but she kept talking like it was no big deal. As we continued talking, she mentioned a few things that, at first, I thought were just guesses. Little details about my life that were accurate, but things I hadn't really told her. She knew I had recently moved to the city. She knew I was still adjusting to the change. She knew about a friend of mine who I'd been fighting with. I figured she must have gotten this information through our conversations, but as she went on, the details started to get deeper, more personal. I started to feel a little uncomfortable, like she was pulling information from my life without me giving it to her. Your brother, he's going through a hard time, isn't he? She asked, her eyes watching me closely. I froze. How could she possibly know about my brother? He lived in another state, and I hadn't mentioned him at all during our talks. I wasn't even sure if I had shared anything about him on my profile. I laughed it off, thinking it was just a coincidence. You're good, I said, trying to make it sound lighthearted, but something in her eyes made me stop. She wasn't smiling anymore. She looked serious. I'm not guessing, she said, her voice soft, almost a whisper. I'm seeing it. Now my heart was racing. I felt the unease crawling up my spine. What do you mean? I asked that I wasn't sure I wanted to hear the answer. She took a deep breath and leaned in closer. I've already lived this day. I stared at her, unsure how to respond. My mind raced as I tried to process what she was saying. What did she mean, already lived this day? Was this some kind of trick? Maybe she was playing some kind of weird game with me. She seemed to read my confusion and continued, almost as if she was explaining something simple. I know what you're thinking, she said, her voice calm and almost soothing. But I promise you, I've already experienced this moment. All of it. I've already met you. We've already had this conversation, and I know everything about you. I didn't know what to say. Was she messing with me? Or was this some kind of sick joke? I couldn't stop looking at her, trying to figure out if she was being serious or if I had just missed something. You've already lived this day. I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. What do you mean? She nodded, looking at me with an intensity I hadn't seen before. I've lived today before. I know what you're going to say next, and I know what you're thinking. I know what's going to happen in the next few minutes, and I know exactly what you're going to ask me. At this point, I was completely freaked out. My mind couldn't keep up with what she was saying. How could she know all of this? How could she know things about me, my family, my life, things I hadn't shared? How could she know? I tried to laugh it off again, to make the awkwardness go away, but the more I looked at her, the more I realized that something was very, very wrong. She was still looking at me with those piercing eyes, and it felt like she could see right through me, like she knew everything I had ever done. "You're here to stop something, aren't you?" she said, her voice low but steady. I didn't answer. I didn't know how to answer. She continued, "You're afraid. You think you're going to die in an accident soon, right? You've been afraid of it for weeks now." I felt my heart stop. I didn't say anything to her about that. No one knew. How could she possibly know? I had been avoiding it, trying to push the fear away, but she had just said the one thing I'd been terrified of. Are you going to stop it?" I finally asked, my voice shaking now. She paused, and for a moment I thought she wasn't going to answer. Her gaze softened, and she said, "I don't know if I can. I'm not sure if the future can be changed." The entire room felt colder, and I could feel the weight of her words sinking into my chest. What was she talking about? What future? What was going to happen to me? "I'm sorry," she said suddenly, her expression changing again. "I shouldn't have told you. I was trying to warn you." The weight in my chest grew heavier. I didn't know if I was supposed to run or stay. I didn't know what was real anymore. I looked around the cafe, the voices in the background sounding muted, distant, like I was in a different world. I stood up, but she reached up to grab my hand. Her grip was strong, but gentle. "Please don't run," she said softly. "I'm not here to hurt you. I just need you to listen." But I couldn't listen anymore. I yanked my hand away and backed up, my heart racing. I didn't want to be there anymore. I didn't want to hear any more of this. I left that cafe, feeling like I had just walked out of a dream. My thoughts were swirling, and nothing made sense anymore. I haven't contacted her since, and I don't plan to. But sometimes when I'm alone, I hear her words echoing in my mind. I've already lived this day, and I wonder if she was telling the truth, if that's why I'm always so afraid of the future. I've always been the type to approach dating cautiously. I wasn't looking for anything too serious, just someone to hang out with, someone fun. That's how it started when I matched with Alex on the app. His profile didn't scream perfect, but it was refreshing. He was funny, intelligent, and seemed like someone who could hold a conversation without resorting to typical small talk. We swapped numbers after a few messages, and it wasn't long before we set up a date. When we met up, I was immediately struck by how charming he was. I mean, it wasn't just that he was attractive, it was his presence. He had this way about him, this quiet confidence that made everything seem effortless. It felt like I had known him for years, even though we were just meeting for the first time. We grabbed dinner at a trendy restaurant downtown and had the kind of conversation that made time fly by. We talked about everything, our favorite books, movies, childhood memories, and there wasn't a single awkward silence. After dinner, we took a walk around the city, past the bright lights and bustling streets. Alex suggested a few spots to grab drinks, and by the time the night was winding down, I was starting to think this could turn into something. Maybe I had found someone interesting after all. I was beginning to think that, just maybe, he was everything I hadn't realized I was looking for. But then, right at the end of the night, he dropped the bombshell. And when he did, I remember feeling my whole body freeze, like time itself had stopped. He turned to me, that same easy smile on his face, but his eyes were intense, almost too focused. "I need to tell you something," he said, his voice suddenly serious. "I'm not whom you think I am." I looked at him confused, half expecting him to make a joke. "What do you mean?" I asked, trying to laugh it off. He didn't smile this time. His gaze hardened, and the mood between us shifted, becoming more tense. "I'm from the future," he said flatly, as if it were the most casual thing in the world. "I was sent here to make sure you make a certain decision." I didn't know how to respond. I thought he was joking at first, but there was something about the way he said it, something so calm and unwavering, that made me stop. I laughed awkwardly, unsure of whether I should play along or call him out for being weird. Okay, come on, I said, still trying to brush it off. This is some kind of prank, right? But Alex didn't laugh. He didn't even flinch. He just looked at me, his eyes unwavering, and I started to feel that familiar sense of unease I get when something doesn't feel right. My heart began to race a little. I could tell that he wasn't messing around. I'm not joking, he said. I was sent from the year 2050. My mission is to change one of your life choices, the choice that leads to a decision that ultimately ruins everything. My mind spun for a second. I don't know what I expected him to say, but this wasn't it. Was he serious? How could he be serious? I know this sounds crazy, he continued, his voice soft but steady, but I've seen it happen. I know what's coming, and I know you won't be able to stop it. It's already too late. I stared at him, my mind trying to catch up with the words coming out of his mouth. What do you mean? What's too late? What's going to happen? He shook his head, a grim look crossing his face. I can't tell you everything, he said. But I can tell you that tonight, this date, everything you're doing, is part of my mission to stop it. It's a choice you make, the wrong one, and everything will spiral out of control. I laughed again, but this time it felt hollow. So, wait, you're saying that this date, meeting me, this is all part of some mission to change my future? Exactly, he said. I've already lived this day. I've already seen it happen, but I'm here to stop it. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in, and my stomach twisted. Something inside me started to scream that this wasn't right, that I needed to leave, but my legs felt like lead, and I couldn't seem to move. Was I dreaming? Was I losing my mind? I'm trying to warn you, Alex said, his voice gentle now. I've been trying to change your mind for weeks, but I'm afraid it's too late. Too late? I echoed. What's too late? What happens in the future? He took a deep breath. In the future, you make a decision that leads to everything falling apart. I'm trying to stop it from happening, but the truth is, I can't change it. Not now. I thought I could, but it's too late to undo. My mind was racing now. What decision? What's going to happen? I asked, desperation creeping into my voice. What am I supposed to do? Alex didn't respond at first. He just looked at me with those piercing eyes of his like he was trying to decide whether or not to tell me the truth. Finally, he spoke again. There's an accident, he said, his voice quiet. It's a car accident. You're supposed to die in it. I've seen it. But I'm trying to stop you from getting into that car. I'm trying to stop you from making the mistake that leads to it. I froze, the blood draining from my face. The words felt like a slap to the face. A car accident. The one I've been scared of for weeks. The one I had nightmares about. How could he know that? How could he possibly know about my fears? I looked at him, my eyes wide, trying to process what he was saying. How do you know all of this? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Because I've already lived this day, Alex said again, his voice almost pleading now. I've seen it happen. I've watched you make the wrong decision, and I've seen everything fall apart. But I'm here to stop it. I'm trying to help you make the right choice before it's too late. I couldn't breathe. My heart was racing, my thoughts were jumbled, and I couldn't make sense of any of it. Was he really from the future? Was any of this real? Is it too late? I asked, my voice barely audible. Is there still time to stop it? He nodded slowly, a sad look crossing his face. I don't know, I'm sorry. I thought I could change it, but it might already be too late. The words hung in the air like a weight that I couldn't escape. I stood there frozen, my mind racing. What was I supposed to do? How can I change something when I didn't even know what I was changing? How can I trust him when everything about this felt impossible? In the end, I don't know how to explain it. Maybe I was still in shock, but I couldn't walk away. I didn't know what to believe anymore, but I didn't want to face the reality of what he was saying. So I stayed. But deep down, I kept wondering, what if I made the wrong choice? What if he was telling the truth, and I had already sealed my fate? I don't know what happened after that. The rest of the night is a blur. All I know is that when I left, the weight of his words followed me. And I still don't know if I can change anything, or if it's already too late. We'd been talking for weeks, and I was honestly excited to meet her. Her name was Sarah, and she had a way of making everything sound so perfect. We matched on a dating app, and we clicked instantly. The conversations felt effortless. She was funny, intelligent, and we shared a lot of the same interests. She seemed perfect, or at least close to it. We talked about everything, the usual stuff at first, like favorite movies and music. But as we spent more time chatting, things got a little deeper. We shared personal stories, things from our pasts that shaped us into who we were. It was the kind of connection you don't get every day, and I thought maybe this could be the start of something real. We finally decided to meet up in person after weeks of texting, and honestly, I was looking forward to it. She suggested we meet at her apartment, and I didn't think much of it. It was convenient, and I figured we'd just hang out and talk like we did online. When I arrived at her place, I noticed something was off right away. The apartment building itself wasn't anything special, one of those older complexes with creaky floors and mismatched paint. But when I knocked on her door, I could feel the weight of the air around me. It was the heavy silence that had settled in the hallway. I didn't think much of it at first. Maybe it was just me being anxious. She opened the door, and I immediately felt relieved. She looked just like her photos, beautiful, with that same warm smile I'd seen in the pictures. But as she stepped aside to let me in, I noticed something different. She seemed a little off, nervous. Her eyes kept darting around, and she didn't seem as confident as she had in our chats. I tried to ignore it, thinking she was just nervous about the first date. It happens. "Hey, it's great to finally meet you in person," I said, giving her a smile. "Yeah, you too," she replied, but her voice was shaky, and I could see her hands trembling slightly as she closed the door behind me. She led me into the living room, and we sat down on the couch. At first, everything seemed fine. We talked, laughed, and caught up on the things we hadn't mentioned in our texts. But the more we talked, the more I could sense her discomfort. She kept glancing at the door, the windows, and even the corners of the room. I didn't say anything at first, but the more she fidgeted, the more my unease grew. Finally, she spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know if I should have invited you here." I furrowed my brow. "What do you mean?" She bit her lip, her eyes wide, and she hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "I don't want to scare you, but there's someone following me." I wasn't sure how to react. Was this some kind of joke? "Following you? Like stalker level following?" I laughed nervously, trying to lighten the mood. She didn't laugh. "Yeah, kind of. I've been seeing things. He's always watching me, but I never know when he's going to show up. I can feel his eyes on me all the time." Now, I was a little freaked out. She wasn't joking. Her face was pale, and she looked genuinely terrified. I tried to convince myself that it was just her overthinking things, that she had an overactive imagination. But the way she said it, the way she was acting, made me feel uneasy. "I don't know what to do about it," she said, her voice trembling. "I've changed my routine, moved apartments, but it's like he's always one step ahead of me." I looked around the room, trying to shake off the growing sense of dread. The apartment was quiet, too quiet. The stillness seemed unnatural, and the more I looked around, the more I noticed how dark it felt, even with the lights on. The shadows in the corners of the room seemed deeper than they should have been, like they were stretching in a way that didn't make sense. I tried to reassure her, but she suddenly stood up, her eyes wide with fear. "Sha," she whispered, holding her finger to her lips. "Do you hear that?" I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. There was a scratching noise coming from the closet across the room. At first, it was faint, like the sound of nails dragging against wood. But the longer we stood there in silence, the louder it became. I looked at her, my mind racing. "Is someone in there?" I asked, my voice barely audible. She didn't answer right away. She just stared at the closet, her eyes filled with fear. Then, without saying a word, she walked over to the closet door, her hands shaking as she reached for the handle. I couldn't move. I felt paralyzed, like I was stuck in some sort of nightmare. She opened the door, and I swear, for a split second, I thought I was going to pass out from the shock. There, standing in the closet, was her, but it wasn't exactly her. It was a different version of Sarah, but it looked wrong. Her clothes were torn, her hair matted, and her skin looked pale and bruised, like she'd been through hell. Her eyes were wide and bloodshot, and her expression was one of pure fear. She looked like she hadn't slept in days, many weeks. I took a step back, my heart racing. What the hell is this? I gasped, my voice shaking. What's going on? The woman in the closet, another Sarah, stared at me with a vacant look in her eyes, and for a moment I thought she wasn't going to say anything. But then she whispered, her voice hoarse, "He's here. He's been watching. He won't leave. He's in this house with us." I looked at the Sarah standing beside me, my mind reeling. What is this? I repeated more urgently now. Who is she? What the hell is going on? The Sarah beside me took a deep breath, her eyes filled with tears. I told you someone's been following me, she said softly. That's him. That's what he's turned me into. A version of me that's already been lost. I've tried to stop it, tried to change it, but every time I do, he finds me again. This time I couldn't escape him. The Sarah in the closet started to scream, but it wasn't a normal scream. It was desperate, like she was begging for help. I could feel the weight of her fear, a hopelessness in her voice. Suddenly, the room seemed colder. The shadows in the corners seemed to stretch even further, and the noise from the closet, scratching, whispering, something that shouldn't have been there, grew louder. I didn't wait around to figure out what was happening next. I turned and bolted for the door, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't even look back. I don't know what happened to Sarah after that. I don't know if she's still there, still trapped in that place, or if that version of her was just one more part of the nightmare. But I haven't been able to forget the look in her eyes, the fear, the hopelessness. And I don't think I'll ever understand what I saw that night. I deleted the app, and I've been trying to forget about her, but sometimes when I'm alone, I hear the scratching in the back of my mind like something's waiting for me. I matched with Jake on the app, and everything seemed perfect. His profile was filled with candid, down-to-earth pictures, and his messages were thoughtful and fun. We clicked immediately. His texts weren't just about surface-level stuff. He asked questions that made me feel like he was really interested in who I was, not just what I could offer. We joked about the usual things, work, our favorite foods, the latest Netflix shows. But there was an ease in our conversations that I hadn't experienced in a while. After a few days of chatting, we decided to meet in person. He suggested a walk in the park, which seemed like a great idea. It wasn't too casual, but not overly fancy either. A nice, relaxed way to get to know each other better. I agreed, and we set a time to meet. I was a little nervous when I arrived. I don't care what anyone says, first dates are always a bit awkward, but Jake was easy to spot. He was standing by the park bench, looking down at his phone. He was exactly as he'd looked in his pictures. Tall, dark-haired, and casually dressed in a hoodie and jeans. But when he looked up to greet me, I couldn't help but notice something was off. His eyes. They were dark, not just brown but hollow, like two empty sockets. There wasn't any emotion behind them, no life. I froze for a moment, unsure if I was imagining it. But the longer I looked, the more unsettling it became. His pupils were black, almost too deep, and it didn't reflect light the way they should. I tried to ignore it. Maybe he was tired, maybe I was just overthinking it, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Hey, you made it, he said with a warm smile, like nothing was wrong. His voice was smooth, and he looked genuinely happy to see me. So I smiled back and tried to push my discomfort to the back of my mind. We started walking along the park path, talking about random stuff. Small talk at first. It was easy enough, and I even started to feel more comfortable again. He seemed like a nice guy, someone you'd bump into at a coffee shop and have a great conversation with. He asked about my job, my hobbies, my family, typical date questions. I answered him, but the whole time, I couldn't shake that weird feeling like I was being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck prickled, but I didn't want to seem paranoid, so I kept my focus on the conversation. As we walked, I started noticing things around us. The park was quieter than usual, but that wasn't strange. It was a weeknight, and not many people came out to walk at that hour. What made me uncomfortable, though, was the feeling that there were eyes on us. Every so often I'd glance around and see someone in the distance, but the second I looked, they would turn away or walk in the opposite direction. I couldn't quite place it, but it felt like I was being followed. Hey, you okay? Jake asked, noticing my distracted expression. Yeah, just a little tired, I said quickly, trying to hide my unease. He smiled again, his eyes a little too intense. You're not nervous, are you? He asked, his tone light but with a strange undercurrent of something I couldn't identify. I laughed, trying to make it sound natural. No, not at all. Just feeling a little off, I guess. We continued walking, and I couldn't stop glancing around. The park felt too still, too silent, like the world outside had stopped moving. The trees, the bushes, the benches, everything looked ordinary, but there was a heaviness in the air that made my chest tight. It was like something was lurking just beneath the surface, waiting to make itself known. I tried to ignore it, but the more I looked around, the more I realized something strange. The people in the park weren't acting normal. I noticed a couple walking ahead of us. They were holding hands, and the woman was laughing, but as I passed them, something about their faces made me feel uneasy. The man's smile was too wide, too controlled. His eyes were empty, like Jake's. I quickly turned my head away, my stomach dropping. A few steps later, I saw another person, an older man sitting on a bench, his face obscured by a hat. But when he looked up at me, his eyes were the same, hollow, empty. He didn't look at Jake at all, just me. He seemed to stare right through me, and my heart skipped a beat. I picked up the pace, my anxiety growing by the second. Jake was talking again, but I wasn't listening anymore. All I could hear were the footsteps of strangers around me, all of them moving too synchronously, like they were in on some secret I wasn't part of. "Are you sure you're okay?" Jake asked again, his voice unusually soft. I stopped walking, turning to face him. "There's something wrong," I said, my voice low, unsure of how to explain it. Everyone in the park, they all look like me, don't they?" He interrupted, a small smile curling at his lips. I froze. I didn't know what to say. My thoughts were racing, trying to make sense of everything I had just seen. The man on the bench, the couple, the people I hadn't been able to stop noticing, they all looked like him. Like a different version of him, dressed in different clothes, at different stages of life, but all with the same eyes, the same hollow, lifeless expression. Jake stepped closer, his eyes darkening as he looked at me with a strange intensity. "It's not just the park, he said, his voice almost too calm. "It's everything. You just haven't noticed yet." I backed away, my pulse quickening. "What are you talking about? Why does everyone look like you? Why are you following me?" Jake didn't answer right away. He just stood there looking at me like he was waiting for something to click in my head. I could feel the world around me shifting, the edges of reality blurring. "You think it's just today, don't you?" he finally said, his voice eerily smooth. "But I've been here, over and over again. Every time you walked past me, you saw a version of me. Every version of me in every time. I'm not just one person to you, I'm a timeline." I shook my head, trying to make sense of what he was saying. "What do you mean? What are you talking about?" He stepped closer again, his voice barely a whisper. "I am you. I am a version of you from a future you can't remember. I am the you that chose differently, the you that didn't make it. But I keep coming back. I keep finding you, trying to figure out how to make it stop." I couldn't breathe. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't move. "Stop what?" I whispered. Jake's eyes softened for a moment, and then his smile returned, this time cold and distant. "The accident. The one that you don't remember yet. It's coming. I've been trying to change it. But every time I think I'm getting close, I see you. I see me. I see us. And nothing changes." I took a step back, my mind racing. I didn't know what to do, what to think. I had to get out of there. I had to run, but I felt like I couldn't escape. The park, the people, Jake, all of it felt like it was closing in on me. I turned and ran, my heart pounding, my legs finally moving as I sprinted past the versions of him. Each version staring at me, watching me, and I couldn't outrun them. They were everywhere. I don't know how far I ran or how long it took. By the time I stopped, I was out of the park and standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. I had no idea how I'd gotten there, but the whole time I could feel them following me, every version of him, always watching. I've never seen Jake again. His profile is gone, and I haven't gone back to that park. But sometimes when I'm walking through the city, I'll catch a glimpse of someone who looks just like him, and my heart will stop.